Chapter 716. Another half an hour passed. The dark space hole was completely closed. The disaster of nothingness was over. For the top families, the Chaos Holy Palace recruitment was over. Some families were happy. Although there were casualties, the losses were not too big. It did not affect the family too much. Some families were sad because Annihilation class elites had died in battle. When the Rule class Void Beast suddenly attacked, more than 10 Annihilation class elites had died. Many Annihilation class elites had died at that time. Annihilation class elites were the foundation of a family. They were the pillars of a top family. Every loss of one was enough to make a top family extremely sad. They were still happy because they were not the worst. The top families that had survived were not the worst. The top families that had suffered the worst were the Urgash family and the Zadi family. The people that the two families had sent had all been killed. Not a single person had survived. The two families were destined to fall. They might not even be able to maintain their status as top families. Although the two families might have had Annihilation class elites in their families and did not come, the two families had suffered a lot of losses. Their former enemies and even their former allies might have taken a bite out of them. The two families might not have been able to survive. We have lost 8 Magic Light Warriors. The Leopold family, the Vega family, and the Urgash family had lost 8 Magic Light Warriors. Although the Annihilation class elites were injured, they did not die. In the end, under the tentacles of the Rule class Void Beast, 3 Magic Light Warriors who had been revived by the revival ability died. The 8 of them could not be revived. After the 8 of them died, their life force and everything else had been absorbed. There was no way they could be revived. It was like people who had been killed by time powers. They could not be revived. Their lifespan had reached the limit. Even if they were revived, they would die immediately. After the big fight, many people were injured. Even those who were not injured were exhausted. Chaos Holy Palace and all the families returned to the Sheeta family city to rest. They rested for a night. The next day, their fatigue and blood power had recovered. The families started to leave Simon City and return to their own families. The Manti family is ready to leave. I'm here to say goodbye. At the temporary residence of the Leopold family, Blanca Mandy arrived. She looked at Gray with an obscure gaze. Gray seemed to be shrouded in mist, and she couldn't see through him at all. We're also preparing to leave. Being stared at by Blanca Mandy, Gray felt a little uncomfortable. Since he had saved Blanca Mandy and the others with the space barrier yesterday, Blanca Mandy had been looking at him strangely. He was a little uneasy. He wasn't sure if Blanca Mandy had noticed anything. Saying goodbye is just one of the reasons. The other reason is to invite you to the Manti family as a guest. You won't refuse, right? Blanca Mandy took a step forward, and the delicate fragrance of her body clearly entered Gray's nose. With a charming smile on her face, she looked at Gray with a bit of dominance. She did not tell the senior members of the Manti family about Gray's mysteries. After all, it was only her guess. Moreover, she was worried that if the family knew about it, they would have some thoughts. In her heart, she did not want the family to become enemies with him. However, in yesterday's battle, Gray's strength was not inferior to the 3 of them. This naturally fell into the Manti family's eyes. Coupled with the fact that the Leopold family had unexpectedly defeated the Vika family, the Mandy family had finally started to value the Leopold family, especially the Gray family. Thus, when she proposed to invite the other party to the family as a guest to deepen their relationship, the family easily agreed. She invited Gray to the Manti family as a guest to deepen their relationship. On the other hand, she wanted to see if she could confirm her guess. Sorry, I'm currently studying alchemy. I really can't find the time. When a beautiful and perfect woman invited him to be a guest, normal people would be very happy to accept. Gray was the same. However, the other party seemed to have noticed something, and he was afraid that too much contact would reveal something. Gray could only regretfully decline. You're already studying alchemy? Well, next time, you must be a guest at the Manti family. Gray gave an irrefutable reason, and Blanca Manti had to give up. She changed the topic and said with a slightly serious expression, "Be careful when you return this time. I'm afraid that some families have already set their eyes on the Leopold family." "We understand. Thank you for the reminder. Gray nodded and thanked her. After sending Blanca Manti off, Gray's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He naturally had guessed that they would be targeted by other top families on the way back. Regarding this, he naturally had an idea. He would not use his resurrection ability to kill people who had no grudges with him in order to increase his power. However, since they had sent themselves to his door, he naturally would not be polite. After leaving Sid City and the Noah Plains that had been destroyed after the battle, Gray and the others rode on the back of the dragon beast and returned to the Leopold family. There were 9 of them when they came, but there were only 7 when they returned. 2 of them did not die in the battle, but they were sent away by Gray and did not return with him. The 2 were not resurrected by his resurrection ability, so Gray could not fully trust them. What he was about to do next could only be done by those he could fully trust. Whoosh, 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 above the sky, there was suddenly a whistling sound. Looking up, they immediately saw 6 giant birds whistling and approaching them quickly. The 6 giant birds had different appearances. Some had snow-white feathers, some were pitch black, and some had fiery red feathers. The only similarity was that there were several people on the back of each giant bird. Pung, pung, pung. One by one, people jumped down from the backs of the giant birds. Some blocked the path in front and back of Gray and the others, while others blocked the left and right sides of Gray and the others, completely surrounding Gray's team and the dragon beast. Every one of them was emitting an intense pressure, firmly locking onto Gray's group of 7. Roar! The dragon beast roared uneasily due to the shock and wanted to run away, but the people in the encirclement acted and immediately stopped it. Thule family, Downey family. What is the meaning of this? Fod glanced at the people surrounding them and recognized their identities. He questioned angrily. The Downey family and the Thule family were ranked in the middle of the top families. But with the 2 families appearing together, the threat they brought was not any weaker than a family ranked in the upper class. We want to borrow something from the Leopold family. Don't worry, once we borrow something, we will leave. We will not make things difficult for you. A beautiful middle-aged woman with crow's feet at the corner of her eyes smiled. What do you want to borrow? Fod suppressed his anger and said, 3 heritage weapons. The middle-aged woman's eyes were burning with passion. What if I don't want to? Fod's eyes were filled with anger, but he suppressed his anger and said, that is not up to you. A middle-aged man with extremely fair skin sneered. If you know what's good for you, hand it over and you can still live. If not, we will have to take it from your corpses. Following his words, waves of murderous intent enveloped Gray's team of 7. It was on the verge of bursting out, as though sharp blades would land on Gray's team in the next moment. You want to borrow something from us? Coincidentally, I also have something to borrow from you. At this moment, Gray spoke, looking at the middle-aged man with a slightly mocking gaze. Junior, do you have the right to speak here? Hearing Gray's sudden words, the middle-aged man with fair skin was first stunned. Then he sneered and looked at Gray with contempt, his face full of disdain. I have no right to speak. A playful smile appeared on Gray's face. I think among everyone here, I'm the most qualified to speak to you, and you better listen to what I want to borrow from you. Oh, elder sister is a little curious. What do you want to borrow from us? The middle-aged woman was full of smiles. Although she called herself elder sister, in fact, she was at least a few hundred years older than Gray. Being Gray's grandmother was too old. Your lives. Gray had a smile on his face, but his words were full of murderous intent. You're courting death. The middle-aged man with fair skin was furious. With a wave of his hand, a purple thunderbolt attacked Gray. Although it was only as thick as an arm, it condensed an extremely terrifying thunderbolt. Even a 5th-level existence of magic light would not be able to block it. Pung! Gray was unharmed. When the purple thunderbolt approached him, it crashed into an invisible space barrier and collapsed with a loud bang. The middle-aged man with fair skin was slightly surprised. His opponent had actually used some method to block his attack. This really surprised him. Just as he was about to attack again, he suddenly paused. He saw a ruined ship and 3 giant birds rapidly approaching. Then, many people jumped down from the ship and surrounded them, looking at them with unkind expressions. Vega clan, Yuga's clan, what are you doing? They had just surrounded the Leopold clan and did not expect that they would be surrounded by even more people soon. Feeling the unfriendly gazes on him, the middle-aged man with fair skin suddenly felt that something was wrong. You are here for the heritage weapon? It's a misunderstanding. The heritage weapon is still with them, not with us. We are willing to withdraw from the fight. The middle-aged woman also hurriedly said, Withdraw? That won't do. After all, we are responding to Lord Grey's call to take your lives. The young man, Joshua, shook his head with a cold smile on his face. You still want to withdraw? Dream on. You have offended Lord Grey. Today, none of you can leave. The hunchbacked old man, Jerome, also laughed coldly. Who are you? The middle-aged woman, the middle-aged man with fair skin, and the other members of the Downey and Tule clans all looked at Grey in disbelief. The two top clans were actually obeying each other's orders. This caused them to be shocked and frightened. At the same time, they felt regret in their hearts. This Leopold clan was really too strange. It was obviously not something that the two clans could take down. But now, there was no longer any time for regret. I am the one who wants your lives. Grey ordered with a cold smile. Attack. Following his orders, the people of the Leopold clan, Vega clan, and Yuga's clan all pounced on the Tului clan and Downey clan. With far more people than the two clans, they pounced on the two clans. Chapter 717. Without much surprise, the Tulii family and the Downey family were all wiped out, including the Annihilation elites. Grey did not even use the 4 Annihilation class Blood Beasts because there was no need to. Without realizing it, Grey had a very powerful faction. The Leopold family, the Vika family, and the Urgas family had a total of 10 Annihilation class elites. The Tulii family and the Downey family only had 5 Annihilation class elites. There was a difference of 2. Plus, there was Grey. The Tulii family and the Downey family had no chance of escaping. He used his resurrection power. In the end, 5 Annihilation classes and 30 Magic Light classes were resurrected. The others were badly damaged, so they could not be resurrected. In addition to the people from the two families, the number of people who had been resurrected by Grey had reached a terrifying number. There were 15 Annihilation classes and 70 Magic Light classes. That was a scary number, but it still did not reach the upper limit of his resurrection power. Super Memory had a scary effect on his resurrection power. Even now, it had not reached the limit. Even Grey was shocked. The Urgas family, the Vika family, the Tulii family, and the Downey family hid. Grey and the Leopold family continued their journey, but there were no more attacking families. He ordered the families to return. Grey rode the Urgas family's rune ship. He was on ahead to the Urgas family. The Tulii family and the Downey family were 2 middle-class families. The Urgas family was one of the top families. They had a rich collection. Grey was not going to miss it. 3 days later, the Urgas family's rune ship was under a giant umbrella. Grey was happily drinking black tea. There were maids of the Urgas family serving him. Because they had such a giant rune ship, the Urgas family would not mistreat themselves. They sent many maids to take care of the rune ship. Outside, there was a thick forest. Many of the giant trees were 100 meters tall, or even a few hundred meters tall. They were in the Forbidden Forest. The path to the Urgas family required them to go through the Forbidden Forest. They were on that path. I control 5 top-class families. Although my power is not as strong as the 3 most powerful families with 6-tier Annihilation elites, I'm still the strongest under the 3 most powerful families. Looking at the dense forest below, Grey fell into deep thought. It's a pity that the territories of the 5 top clans are far apart from each other. It's very difficult for them to help each other. It's even difficult for them to send messages. It's very difficult for them to unite. The reason why the Chaos Temple was able to quickly spread the news to the various top clans was because of the magic rune machine, which allowed them to communicate with each other. However, this method wouldn't work between top clans. This magic runic machine could only transmit information to the Chaos Temple or receive information from the Chaos Temple. It couldn't transmit information between top clans. If you want to connect the 5 families, there's no need to think about using the magic script machine. The various holy temples are tightly controlled, so it's impossible to obtain the relevant technology or items. Other than that, what other methods are there? Gray's right hand subconsciously touched his chin. Suddenly, a light flashed in his head. He thought of an ability. Now, Gray was very familiar with the soul, element, and body. There were 35 basic powers in the 3 categories. He knew the specialty of each power. According to what he knew, among the 35 powers, one of them had the ability to communicate over a long distance. To be more accurate, that power had the ability to control things over a long distance. Communicating over a long distance was not the specialty of that power. Controlling things over a long distance was the specialty of that power. That power was called a puppet power. It was one of the soul powers. It was very rare, but it was also very powerful. In some ways, that power was similar to the resurrection power. That power could not resurrect a dead creature. It could enslave a creature's mind and soul. It could turn the creature into a puppet. Even if the creature was far away, it could still be controlled from a long distance. Because of the similarity between that power and the resurrection power, Gray had been searching for the blood of a calamity gray blood fiend with that power. He wanted to see if he could fuse that power with the resurrection power. However, blood fiends with spiritual abilities were rare to begin with. Just like last time, the blood essence of the Phantom Fox had actually caused a conflict between Gray and a large family. This was evident from this. Furthermore, this puppet power was very rare even among blood fiends with soul powers. It was even more difficult to find. Therefore, although he had been searching for it, he had not been able to find it. Now, he could not help but think of that power again. With the long-distance control of that power, if it could really be fused with the resurrection power, he should be able to contact the resurrected person even if they were far away. I wonder if we can gather the power of the 5 great families to search for that blood. Picking up the black tea, Gray took a sip. Now, he could only hope that the 5 families had the ability to find the blood of this blood fiend. As for searching for it in the Forbidden Forest, it would be no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. He would not do that. Whoosh, whoosh. In the dense Forbidden Forest, there were very few human footprints. However, at this moment, under the rune ship, there was a big chase. A young man was injured in many places. Blood had almost soaked his clothes. He was panting heavily as he ran with all his might. He was using the tall trees to block the people chasing behind him. It could be seen that his body was slightly exhausted. He was completely relying on his willpower to run. Behind him, there were 3 people chasing after him. The 3 of them were wearing the same uniform and should belong to the same force. Humph. Among the 3 people, a cold-looking middle-aged man snorted and slashed out with his sword. A dark green fog quickly spread forward. Any life that had encountered melted under the dark green fog. It seemed that it was going to engulf the young man in front of it. The young man in front was already slightly exhausted. After feeling the movement behind him, he turned around with difficulty and waved the spear in his hand. Under his spear, a purple flame appeared and turned into a wall of flames. It burned the dark green fog to nothing. A strong explosion and a flaming hurricane temporarily blocked the 3 people. It temporarily blocked the 3 people chasing after him. However, his face was even paler. He bit his lips until they bled. He forced himself to stay alert and ran forward. However, he had not run far before the 3 people broke through the flaming hurricane and chased after him. After running for a few hundred meters, the young man finally slowed down due to the excessive blood loss. His physical strength was exhausted. Taking this opportunity, the 3 people chasing after him finally stopped him and surrounded him. Accept your fate. You can't escape. Blocking the way, the cold-looking middle-aged man said with a cold expression. The young man who was surrounded felt despair. The large amount of blood in his body made him extremely exhausted. He knew that he would most likely die here today. After running for more than a month, he did not expect that he would not be able to escape death in the end. In his mind, a beautiful figure appeared. He was not afraid of death, but if he died like this, she would probably be very sad. Thinking of this, he forced himself to stay alert. The remaining power of blood was poured into the spear. The long spear was covered in purple flames. Holding the long spear that was wrapped in purple flames, he stabbed at the cold-looking middle-aged man like an arrow. He wanted to knock the cold-looking middle-aged man away. Clang! The cold-looking middle-aged man's long saber was wrapped in a dark green mist. He blocked the spear and forced the young man to retreat slightly. If you were in your best condition, I might be a little afraid. But now, you should accept your fate. You will die today. After forcing the young man to retreat, the cold-looking middle-aged man sneered. The young man was not weak. If it was a one-on-one, none of the three people were confident that they could take him down. However, facing the three of them, the young man had not only used up a large amount of his power of blood, he was also injured. Even if it was a one-on-one, the other party was no match for him. Why are we talking nonsense with him? Let's kill him quickly. After chasing him for more than a month, we are exhausted. This time, we can finally end it. A short man said impatiently, "Do it. Don't give him a chance to recover. He has mastered a blood skill. If his power of blood recovers to the point where he can use it, it will be troublesome." The other man's eyes were a little gloomy as he spoke. The three of them closed in on the young man, preventing him from suddenly escaping. They did not want to give him a chance to escape. Revenge. I'm afraid this young man won't be able to escape. Hundreds of meters in the sky, on the ruined ship of the Urgash family, many people looked at the chase below with interest. They did not have any intention of saving the young man. The Urgash family was not a kind family. Otherwise, they would not have done something like snatching the inherited weapon. They were not related to the young man, so naturally, they would not save him. Gray also had no intention of saving him. It was not worthwhile to provoke a family for a stranger. Although there were few families that could threaten him with his current strength, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Standing beside the railing of the ruined ship, he looked down calmly. Puff! At this moment, the three of them attacked the young man together. Although the young man dodged the attack and blocked the attack, he was slashed by the saber. Blood splattered all over his body as he flew backward. What? Gray's eyes suddenly widened, revealing a shocked expression. With a flip, he jumped down from the ruined ship. From a height of hundreds of meters, he fell vertically like a meteor. The moment the young man was sent flying backward, he saw the face of the young man being chased clearly. The young man being chased was Francis, who had come to the Origin world with him. The Origin world was too vast and boundless. Even a rule-level powerhouse would not dare to say that their footprints covered every corner of the Origin world. He did not have much hope of finding the three of them, so he did not let his subordinates search for them. He did not expect to meet them again under such circumstances. Chapter 718. Boom! Gray's body smashed down like a meteorite, creating a crater in the forest and causing the ground to shake. Such a commotion naturally alarmed the three people besieging Francis. They temporarily gave up on besieging Francis and looked at Gray warily. They naturally noticed the ruined ship in the sky. They were originally worried that the other party would interfere, but they were relieved when they saw that the people on the ruined ship did not do anything other than watch. However, they did not expect that just as they were about to kill Francis, the people on the ruined ship moved and a young man jumped down. "Sir, we are from the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom. He is someone that the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom wants to kill." The cold-faced, middle-aged man sized up Gray and said with some fear, "A family that could afford a ruined ship was definitely a top family. Such a family was not simple. Even the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom would not be willing to provoke them. West Hermit Kingdom, a kingdom force. You are from the Eternal Dominion?" Gray's expression turned cold as he looked at the three. There were two large territories near the Forbidden Forest. One of them was called the Chaos Territory, which was overseen by the Chaos Temple. The forces there were in the form of family clans. The other territory was called the Eternal Dominion, which was overseen by the Eternal Holy Empire, which was not weaker than the Chaos Temple. The forces there were in the form of a kingdom. Since the other party claimed to be from the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom, they naturally came from the Eternal Dominion. "Yes, sir. He is someone that the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom wants to kill. Please don't get involved in this matter for the sake of the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom." The cold-faced, middle-aged man lowered his posture, but there was a hint of threat in his words. Clearly, he wanted the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom to intimidate Gray. The royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom? Gray's expression turned cold in the next moment. What great respect! A force from the Eternal Dominion wants a force from the Chaos Territory to give them face. I'm afraid the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom doesn't have that much respect. You are courting death. The three middle-aged men were instantly infuriated. The short man was unable to stop himself from wanting to attack Gray. However, the sinister-looking man stopped him, his eyes gesturing towards the sky. Ever since the young man in front of them jumped down from the ruined ship floating in the sky, the expressions of everyone on the ship who had been waiting to watch a good show disappeared. Many people stared coldly at the three of them. Cough, cough. Francis coughed and tried to stand up with the support of his spear. Gray hurried over to support him and handed him a bottle of advanced healing potion. After drinking the advanced healing potion, Francis's complexion improved a little. "I didn't expect to meet you here. I didn't expect to meet you here. What's going on? Why is he being pursued by the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family? It's a long story." Francis smiled bitterly and shook his head. There was a trace of loneliness in his eyes. "You know each other?" Hearing the conversation between Gray and Francis, the three of them were shocked. Then, they pulled away without hesitation. They originally thought that there was still room for mediation. After all, the other party just happened to meet them. If they paid a price, the other party might hand over Francis. However, they didn't expect that the other party actually knew each other. Moreover, it seemed that their relationship wasn't shallow. They immediately felt that something was wrong and turned to flee. Chi-chi. The three of them didn't run far before three black fog swiftly wrapped around their bodies. Then they felt a sharp pain. The three of them were shocked to find that their bodies were actually melting. The intense pain caused the three of them to scream. They used their abilities to struggle violently, but they couldn't break free. Although the black fog shrouding them was like a shadow substance, it had extraordinary tenacity. No matter how they struggled, it was useless. "You can't kill us. We're from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. If you kill us, you'll become an enemy of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family." The short man screamed in horror and despair. Unfortunately, Gray had no intention of changing his mind. In the end, under the black fog, the flesh of the three of them disappeared. Even their bones were melted. The three of them didn't know that it was precisely because they were from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family that Gray wanted to kill them. Although he wasn't afraid of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, he wanted to avoid trouble as much as possible. If he could kill the three of them and cut off the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family's trail of Francis, that would naturally be the best. After being saved by you, you've actually become so much stronger. I originally thought that I could get closer to you, but now it seems that the distance between us is getting farther and farther. Seeing that Gray killed the three of them so easily and even completely erased all traces of their existence, Francis exclaimed in surprise. "Your strength has also improved a lot. You've actually reached the 4th stage of the King's stage. It seems that you've gained a lot after coming to the Source World." Gray smiled and joked. Whether it was Francis or the 3 people he killed, they all had the strength of the 4th stage of the King's stage. In less than 2 years, they had reached the 4th stage of the King's stage. Although their improvement wasn't as great as his, it was still extremely great. "Let's go. Let's get out of here first." After bringing Francis onto the ruined ship, Gray ordered the ruined ship to set off quickly and leave the place where they had just fought. They are? Seeing that the people on the ruined ship were in awe of Gray, Francis was full of surprise. As far as he knew, a family that could afford a ruined ship must be a top family. Originally, he was already very curious about how Gray could be related to a top family. Now that he saw that the people of the top family were in awe of Gray, he couldn't help but be even more surprised. A family that was looking for trouble with me. However, I subdued them after beating them up. Gray explained briefly. As for you, It seems that a lot of things have happened in the past 2 years. After talking for a while, Gray learned about Francis's experience in the past 2 years. Like Gray, he had also been teleported into the Forbidden Forest. His strength was only at the first stage of the King stage, and he wasn't good at jungle techniques. Naturally, it was very difficult for him to survive in the Forbidden Forest. He had encountered danger several times. Once, he encountered a magic light level blood beast. He couldn't escape no matter how hard he tried. Fortunately, he was saved in the end. The person who saved him became his teacher. His teacher was a consecrator of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. He was an Annihilation class elite who didn't have much time left in his life. He entered the Forbidden Forest to look for opportunities and accidentally met him. With the help of the old man, he obtained a magic light level blood meridian and the subsequent blood skills. Because of this, his strength was able to quickly increase and reach the fourth stage of the King stage. Unfortunately, the old man didn't have much time left. He had passed away a few months ago. During his time in the West Hermit Kingdom, because of the old man, he met the third princess, Dana Sai. They started to have feelings for each other and started dating. With the old man there and the identity of an Annihilation class elite's disciple, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family didn't have much to say about it. After the old man died, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family's attitude changed. They tried to stop the two of them from dating. The two of them decided to elope, but they were discovered by the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, who had been secretly monitoring them. Dana Sai was captured, and he was hunted down by the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. After running for a month, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family found him. They chased him all the way here. Gray, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family won't just let this go. When I recover, you should let me off the ship. Otherwise, I will drag you down. Although he was shocked by Gray's power and the fact that he could make a top family obey him, he knew how scary the West Hermit Kingdom was. Among the many kingdoms in Eternal Dominion, it was one of the top kingdoms. It was extremely powerful. He didn't think Gray's power and influence could fight against a kingdom like that. Don't worry. I can deal with the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. You can stay here. Gray shook his head, not to mention his relationship with Sophia. Even if it was his relationship with Francis, it was impossible for him to look on helplessly as the other continued to be hunted down like this. But Francis wanted to say something, but Gray waved his hand to stop him. You don't have to say anything. You are badly injured. Rest well. Boom! Suddenly, the ruined ship stopped moving. It went from moving to still in a very short amount of time. Some of the furnishings in the ruined ship's room fell to the ground when it suddenly stopped. What happened? Gray frowned and asked the young man, Joshua, who was walking over. Mr. Gray, the ruined ship has been stopped. The young man, Joshua, quickly answered. Not good. It must be the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. Francis's face immediately changed when he heard the words of the young man, Joshua. To be able to stop a runic ship that was flying at such a high speed, that person had to be extremely strong. After all, if a runic ship were to travel at full speed, its speed would be several times faster than Demon Shine's. Without a formidable strength, it was impossible to stop a runic ship. You rest first. I'll go out and take a look. Gray's face was cold. Without any explanation, he told Francis to stay in the room and walk to the deck. Behind him, the young man, Joshua, hurriedly followed. Gray came to the deck and found that there were 5 other people besides the Urgus family. They should be the ones who forced the ruined ship to stop. Who are you? Gray glanced at the 5 of them and asked with a cold look in his eyes. We are very sorry to disturb you. We are members of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. We are tracking a criminal on your family's ruined ship. We hope your family can hand him over to us. Among the 5 people, an old man sensed that Francis was on the ruined ship through some unknown method and spoke with certainty. Chapter 719. The person you're looking for is not here. Gray's eyebrows slightly wrinkled as he said coldly. He had killed the 3 people just now in order to avoid future troubles. But he didn't expect that not only would he fail to avoid them, but they would also arrive so quickly. Mister, one of us is good at tracking scent. I'm sure he is on your ruined ship. Please hand him over. The old man frowned as he spoke. If I say there is no one, then there is no one. You can leave now." Gray's face turned cold as he ordered them to leave. "Young man, are you sure you want to represent your family and become enemies with the West Hermit Kingdom royal family?" The old man's face turned gloomy, and his voice was threatening. "I don't think you have the power to represent your family and become enemies with the West Hermit Kingdom royal family. I advise you to hand him over. Otherwise, you will not be able to bear the consequences." "Are you threatening me?" Gray's face turned cold. "If you want to think of it that way, you can think of it that way," the old man said with a gloomy face. The old man said with a gloomy expression. However, in the next instant, his complexion turned deathly pale. Not only him, but the 4 people who came with him also turned deathly pale. Shock appeared in their eyes. Dozens of presences locked onto them. Each of the presences was at least magic light level. 6 of the presences gave them an extreme sense of danger. They could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Those were the presences of annihilation elites. Seeing that the person in charge was a young man like Gray, they thought it was a direct descendant of a top family going out. There were no elites on the ship, and their power was enough to deal with it. So, they did not think it was a big deal. After failing to persuade him, they began to threaten him. What they did not expect was that there were so many elites on the ruined ship. There were dozens of magic light level elites, and there were even 6 annihilation elites. It was not a direct descendant of a top family going out. It was all the elites of top family going out. Rashly boarding the ruined ship was a huge mistake. It was like poking a hornet's nest. The West Hermit Kingdom royal family? Gray's cold eyes scanned the 5 people. They finally landed on the old man. "I'm sure I can represent my family. But are you sure you want to represent the West Hermit Kingdom royal family and become enemies with my family?" This cold sweat slid down his forehead as the old man solemnly swept his gaze over the unfriendly gazes around him. Although his status in the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family wasn't low, he still couldn't make the decision to make such an important decision that could affect his family's foundation. Although he had a high status in the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, he still couldn't make the decision. With a cold look in his eyes, Gray said with a serious face, "The person you're pursuing is my friend. I request the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family to immediately stop pursuing my friend. Otherwise, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family should be prepared to become enemies with my clan." A hesitant expression appeared on the old man's face. He could naturally hear the seriousness in Gray's words. He understood that if he didn't stop the pursuit, he might really become an enemy of a top family that wasn't any weaker than the West Ho Kingdom's royal family. After considering for a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, "If you can guarantee that he will never step into the West Hermit Kingdom again and never meet Her Highness Dinah again, I can cancel the pursuit on behalf of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. You have no right to negotiate with me," Gray said with a cold face. "If you can't agree to this, I'm afraid the royal family won't agree," the old man said with a difficult expression. "Then it's up to the royal family to decide. All right, you can leave." Gray waved his hand to drive the 5 people off the runic ship. As a friend, he couldn't make the decision on behalf of Francis. The decision was up to Francis himself. 2 days later, Gray's group arrived at the Urgash family. After a series of tricks, Gray took complete control of the Urgash family. Then, under the guidance of the young man, Gray arrived at the Urgash family's secret room through a passage with many mechanisms. The secret room was filled with all kinds of precious items. There were many precious herbs, many magic weapons, many magic potions, many precious metals. As a clan that could be ranked in the upper echelons of the top clans, the Urgas clan's collection was enormous, to the point that Gray was somewhat overwhelmed. Many of them were very difficult to buy with money. It completely confirmed the saying that things that could be bought with money weren't precious. Precious things couldn't be bought with money. Gray didn't have much need for magic weapons and precious metals. He had already snatched a weapon from Joshua. It was an inheritance-level weapon and was more powerful than all the magic weapons here. Even if he asked a master refiner to refine it with precious metals, it might not be able to surpass the one in his hand. Therefore, he didn't take any of these 2 items. But magic potions, especially precious herbs, were what he needed. The growth of every master refiner was at the cost of a large amount of precious herbs. In the future, when he reached a higher level as a master refiner, he would inevitably need a large amount of precious herbs to practice. Therefore, he stuffed a large amount of precious herbs into his spatial item and swept it clean. Entering another room. The room was filled with crystal vessels of different sizes. Many of the crystal vessels had red liquid in them. A small portion of the crystal vessels didn't have red liquid. It was the place where the Urgash family stored the blood of the blood fiends. Wind Demon Fox, Demon Claw Beast, Blizzard Bear, Gray scanned the room and discovered that the blood fiends' blood here were at least magic light level. There were also quite a few disaster-grade blood fiends' blood. There were even some extremely precious blood fiends' blood. Golden Horn Calamity Beast. When he saw a crystal bottle labeled Golden Horn Calamity Beast, Gray's gaze couldn't help but pause. The Golden Horn Calamity Beast was a disaster-grade blood fiend with metal, earth, fire, and lightning elemental abilities. It was an extremely rare type of disaster-grade blood fiend. If he had obtained a portion of this blood fiend's blood back then, he would have saved a chance to evolve. However, such precious blood fiends' blood were usually sealed in the secret chambers of the top families or even the Holy Cathedral. They wouldn't be sold to the outside world at all. Therefore, even though he had searched through the 3 largest blood fiend shops in Chaos City, he hadn't been able to find a disaster-grade blood fiend with 3 abilities, let alone a disaster-grade blood fiend with 4 abilities. Unfortunately, this blood fiend's blood was useless to him now. Gray shifted his gaze away from the Golden Horn Calamity Beast blood and continued to look at the other blood fiend's blood. Soon, he paused again. Bird of Calamity. The Bird of Calamity was also a type of blood fiend with 4 abilities. It had earth, wind, lightning, and fire elemental abilities. It could bring disaster to earth, wind, lightning, and fire elemental bodies respectively, so it was called the Bird of Calamity. After that, Gray continued to look at the other blood fiend's blood. He saw 3 blood fiends' blood with 4 abilities and 9 blood fiends' blood with 3 abilities. Other than that, Gray also saw some blood fiends' blood with rare abilities. For example, the White Bone Calamity Elephant with the ability to ossify. This type of blood fiend could control its bones at will. It could control its bones to fight. Not only did it have super strong defense, but it also had very strong combat abilities. Another example was the Spirit Disaster Beast with spiritual power. This was a type of blood fiend with spiritual power. This type of blood fiend would nurture a combat spirit in its body from the moment it was born. The combat spirit wasn't afraid of sunlight and could materialize. It had extremely strong offensive abilities. The Urgas family was indeed a family with a deep heritage among the top families. Their blood collection was much richer than the Leopold family's. Compared to the Urgas family's collection, the Leopold family's collection was like the difference between a poor family and a noble family. However, considering that the Leopold family had only been a top family for 200 years, it wasn't hard to understand. After taking a set of blood from all the blood fiends with special abilities, Gray left the room. He still hadn't decided whether to consume the blood from these blood fiends with special abilities. However, it wouldn't be wrong to take a set as a backup. He came to another room. After entering this room, Gray couldn't help but feel slightly strange. In the previous rooms, the items in each room belonged to the same category. For example, the rooms where precious herbs were stored, the rooms where precious metals were stored, the rooms where magic potions were stored. Every item in the room belonged to the same category. However, the items in this room were very mixed. Gray saw metals that looked like meteorites, unknown stones that sparkled with the radiance of gems, and things that looked like blood fiends' teeth. In short, the items were very mixed, and there was no pattern to speak of. What's with this room? Gray tilted his head and asked Joshua. The items in this room are things that the family has accumulated over the years. I can't determine their specific types and values. Joshua replied, things that I can't determine their values? Gray's interest was piqued. He couldn't help but look at the items in the room one by one to see if he could identify a few. 1, 2, 3. Soon, Gray realized that he couldn't identify the items that even a family with such a deep heritage like the Urga's family couldn't identify. Although he had super memory and read a lot of books during this period of time, these books were relatively common, and the items recorded were also relatively common. The items in front of him right now were not recorded in the books at all. Could this be blood? Just as he was about to give up, he saw a very transparent gem that was about the size of an adult's foot. Inside it, Gray actually saw a bright red object that looked like blood. Yes, it contains the blood of some kind of blood fiend. Judging from the aura it emits, it shouldn't be of a low level. However, we don't know what kind of blood fiend's blood it is. That's why the family kept it here after obtaining it. Joshua explained. Chapter 720. I don't know what kind of blood fiend's blood. Gray picked up the gemstone and looked at it carefully. Inside the amber gemstone, a lump of blood the size of a baby's fist could be seen clearly. The color was bright red and glistening. There was a faint aura coming out of it. Although it was faint, it was very majestic. It was obviously the blood of a high-level blood fiend. Without hesitation, Gray put the gemstone into his space item. He was going to break the gemstone and take out the blood later. He was very interested in anything related to blood. If he kept it in his hands, maybe someone would be able to identify the type of blood fiend's blood in the future. Based on his judgment, this blood fiend's blood was not simple. The outer layer had already crystallized into a gemstone. This blood fiend's blood must have existed for a very long time. Like amber, it could only be formed after a very long time. But even after such a long time, the blood fiend's blood was still bright and glistening. There was no sign of decay. This showed that this blood fiend's blood was not simple. After leaving the room and searching all the secret rooms of the Urgash family, Gray left the secret room of the Urgash family with satisfaction. Not only did he get a lot of precious herbs, but he also got a lot of rare blood fiend's blood. It was a great harvest. He could not help but think about whether he should visit the secret rooms of the Thule family, the Downey family, and the Vika family. After going to see Francis, Gray returned to the place the Urgash family had arranged for him. He took out the gemstone and placed it on the flat table. On Gray's right index finger, there was a small but very sharp green wind blade attached to it. The green wind blade gently scratched the upper part of the gemstone. The upper part of the gemstone was immediately cut open. The cut was just enough to cut open the top of the lump of blood. Gray reached out and opened the upper part of the gemstone. At that moment, crash! A terrifying aura suddenly appeared. No, it should not be said that it suddenly appeared. It should be said that the aura that already existed suddenly expanded by hundreds or thousands of times. The strong aura made Gray feel slightly suffocated. He could not help but take a step back. What a powerful aura. It's definitely not the aura of an ordinary annihilation-grade blood fiend. Gray's eyes looked shocked. With his power, he could easily face the presence of an annihilation-class elite. Under that presence, he felt suffocated. He could not help but take a step back. One could only imagine how strong that presence was. The blood of a blood fiend that's close to the rule rank, or is it the blood of a rule rank blood fiend? Gray guessed in shock. His judgment was not wrong. The blood sealed in the gem was indeed not simple. It could be close to the blood of a rule-level blood fiend, or even the blood of a rule-level blood fiend. No matter which possibility it was, it meant that it was not simple. Entering the secret chamber of the Urga's family this time, the biggest gain might be this unknown blood fiend's blood. Fortunately, the gemstones outside have concealed most of its aura. Otherwise, it might not have fallen into my hands. The gemstones had greatly weakened the presence of the blood. When the Urga's family first obtained the gemstones, they thought it was just the blood of an ordinary annihilation-class blood fiend. Plus, they did not know what kind of blood fiend's blood it was. So, they were not very interested. They threw it away in the secret chamber. If the blood had revealed such a strong presence before, no matter how stupid they were, the people who first obtained the gemstones would have been able to guess how precious the blood was. They would not have fallen into Gray's hands. He took out a crystal container that was used to hold blood. Gray carefully put the blood into the crystal container. With my body's current condition, I should be able to consume the blood to evolve again. Should I consume this unknown blood fiend's blood? The blood in the crystal container was very bright. It had a strong presence. Gray had a desire to consume the blood to evolve. Under normal circumstances, consuming the blood of an unknown blood fiend was not a good idea. The strong presence showed that the level of the blood was very high. If he consumed it, he might gain a lot of benefits. Dong, dong, dong. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Through the mind connection, Gray could tell that it was Joshua. The arrival of the other person brought Gray back to reality. He sealed the blood and put it into a space item. Gray opened the door and asked, "What is it?" "Master Gray, we have found the location of the disaster-class blood fiend's blood with the puppet ability that you asked us to find." Joshua bowed to Gray and said, "We have found the location. We got his whereabouts." "Where is he?" Gray's face was filled with joy. He could not help but ask excitedly. If he could obtain the blood of a blood fiend with the puppet ability and merge it with his resurrection ability, then he might be able to communicate with the resurrected person from a long distance. With this long-distance communication ability, he would be able to link up all the forces he currently possessed. They would be able to help each other in both offense and defense. He might even be able to contact the plane and understand the situation of the Fergus family and the plane over the past 2 years. It's at the Gusman family. According to the information we obtained, the Gusman family once hunted a disaster-class blood fiend puppet, the Fox of Calamity, over 100 years ago. There should be some remaining blood of the Fox of Calamity puppet. Joshua replied, "The Gusman family?" The information he knew about the Gusman family flashed through Gray's mind. The Gusman family was a top-notch family adjacent to the Urgus family. They were ranked in the upper echelons of the top-notch families and were not weaker than the Urgus family. It was worth mentioning that the Gusman family had a very good reputation among the top-notch families. They had a good relationship with many other top-notch families. Send someone to purchase it immediately. Buy one at all costs. Gray immediately ordered. To his surprise, he did not get the answer he wanted. Joshua frowned and said, "That's right." Joshua frowned and said, "Lord Gray, it would be best if you could personally make a trip to the Gusman family." "Personally make a trip? Why?" Gray looked at Joshua in confusion. Because of some matters, the Urgus family and the Gusman family have always been at odds with each other. If the Urgus family were to send someone over, it might backfire. At odds with each other? Gray's expression turned strange, but he was surprisingly able to understand. With the Urgus family's character of wanting to snatch anything good they saw, it was not surprising that they would become enemies with the Gusman family. It was very likely that they had taken a fancy to something of the Gusman family and tried to snatch it, ultimately becoming enemies with the Gusman family. All right, the Urgus family should not get involved in this matter. Gray waved his hand and dismissed the other party. He decided to personally make a trip. He was determined to obtain the blood of the Fox of Calamity puppet. It would be too late for regrets if he ruined things because of the Urgus family. He once again took out the blood of the unknown blood fiend and hesitated for a long time, but in the end, he put it away. Since he already had clues about the puppet ability, he naturally had to use the remaining transformation opportunity on the puppet ability. As for the blood of the unknown blood fiend, he could only wait for the next time. After letting Francis recuperate in the Urgus family, Gray set off for the Gusman family. A few hours later, he arrived at the Gusman family city adjacent to the Urgus family. Most of the families in the Origin world had the habit of naming their cities after their family, and the Gusman family was no exception. Thus, this city was called the Gusman City. This was a rather bustling city. The streets were extremely smooth with a cement-like material, and there was an endless flow of carriages and crowds. There were all kinds of shops on both sides of the streets, and the sound of bargaining could be heard from time to time. After arriving at the Gusman family's castle at the center and revealing his identity, Gray was welcomed into a living room. Not long after, a young man arrived. The young man was tall and had a square face. Although he was not considered handsome, he had a masculine feel to him. An aristocratic temperament spontaneously emerged from his body, giving off an external impression that he was rather trustworthy. Gray found this young man somewhat familiar. He had seen him in the Gusman family's team when they were encircling and suppressing the Void Beasts. As expected, it's Sir Gray. Seeing Gray, the young man revealed a smile and appeared to be very enthusiastic. Gray had an impression of the young man, and the young man naturally had an impression of Gray as well. In fact, with Gray's performance in the process of killing the void beasts, it was difficult not to have an impression of him. Sir Jonathan, the main reason for my visit to the Gusman family is to purchase something from the Gusman family. After exchanging pleasantries, Gray learned of the other party's name, Jonathan Gusman. May I know what Sir Gray wishes to purchase? Jonathan Gusman was not surprised by Gray's request. After all, the Leopold family had almost no contact with the Gusman family. There had to be a reason for the sudden visit. I heard that the Gusman family had once hunted a fox of Calamity puppet. I wonder if there's any leftover blood of the fox of Calamity puppet. If there is, I'd like to purchase a portion of the fox of Calamity puppet's blood. Fox of Calamity puppet's blood? Jonathan Gusman recalled for a moment and then looked at Gray. The Gusman family does have some fox of Calamity puppet's blood, but there's not much left. However, since Sir Gray wishes to purchase it, there's naturally no problem. Knock, knock, knock. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. Excuse me. Jonathan Gusman nodded slightly to Gray before opening the door and walking out. A moment later, he returned. There was a faint trace of joy on his face, probably because he had heard some good news. Jonathan Gusman smiled apologetically to Gray for his loss of composure and said, I apologize for my loss of composure. Sir Gray, I can use my share of resources to obtain a portion of the fox of Calamity puppet's blood for you. I don't even need to pay, but I hope that Sir Gray can do me a favor. Chapter 721. What kind of help? Gray asked after some thought. He did not immediately agree. It would be foolish to agree without knowing what the other party needed help with. Although doing a favor seemed to save him a lot of money, it was not necessarily more worth it than spending some money to buy it. To tell you the truth, my sister found a frost moon flower in the Forbidden Forest, but it is guarded by a powerful magic light, rank blood fiend. It will be difficult for the two of us to kill that magic light rank blood fiend, so we would like to ask for your help. Jonathan Gusman said in a very sincere tone, Frost moon flower? You are really lucky to have found such a precious magic herb. Gray was slightly surprised. As a pharmacist, he naturally knew what the frost moon flower was. The frost moon flower was a precious magic herb, and its value was not lower than the blood moon grass he had obtained before. It could also be used as a main ingredient to aid in cultivation. I have a question. With the Gusman family strength, you should not lack suitable experts. Why are you asking for my help? There are indeed many suitable experts in the family, but if you ask them to help, they will have to share a portion of the frost moon flower as the price. It just so happens that you need the blood of the puppet fox of Calamity, so I would like to use the blood of the puppet fox of Calamity as the price to ask for your help. Jonathan Guzman explained frankly. Deal. After hearing the other party's words, Gray did not hesitate and immediately agreed. As for the powerful magic light rank blood fiend that the other party mentioned, he did not even ask about it. With his current strength, a magic light rank blood fiend was naturally nothing in his eyes. What he needed to consider was to cooperate with the other party to kill this magic light rank blood fiend without exposing his strength as much as possible. Sir Gray, it's great that you are willing to help. After receiving an affirmative answer from Gray, Jonathan Gusman smiled. You are welcome. Besides, I'm not helping for free. There will be a reward. Gray nodded in response. The first time they had met, the other party had given him a good impression, as expected of a disciple of the Gusman clan who had a good reputation. Indeed, he had the style of the Gusman clan. Since time was of the essence, and he was worried that the frost moon flower would be swallowed by the magic light level blood fiend, Jonathan Gusman made some preparations before setting off with Gray. A young woman set off with them. She was Jonathan Guzman's sister, Rebecca Guzman. She was wearing a red battle suit and looked quite pretty. Her hair was combed into a large braid, and the braid swayed slightly as she walked. Brother, is it really okay to ask him for help? I estimate that the battle strength of that blood fiend is already at the 5th level of magic light. On the way, Rebecca Guzman moved closer to Jonathan Gusman and asked softly. She was obviously worried about Gray's strength. She had heard a little about Gray. She heard that he had obtained the qualification to enter the Tower of Trials in the top clans competition not long ago. However, she did not take it to heart because she had also obtained the qualification to enter the Tower of Trials. It was just that it was 5 years ago. In fact, in this competition for the qualification to enter the Tower of Trials, the two upper clans, the Gusman clan and the Urgas clan, did not send out their most outstanding disciples. This allowed the disciples of the middle clans, like Miguel Vija, to have a chance. The reason was that the outstanding disciples of the two clans had already entered the Tower of Trials before, and each person could only enter the Tower of Trials once. Don't underestimate him. His battle strength is not necessarily weaker than mine. He might even be stronger than me. Jonathan Gusman said with a solemn expression. Not weaker than you, and might even be stronger than you? Brother, are you sure? Rebecca Gusman's expression turned to one of surprise. She was very clear about her brother's strength. He was at the 4th level of magic light, and he possessed water and metal elemental abilities. His battle strength was comparable to the 5th level of magic light. However, her brother, who was so powerful, actually said that the other party was comparable to him or might even surpass him. Did this not mean that the other party's battle strength was at least at the 5th level of magic light? Of course, I'm not joking. Jonathan Gusman said with a solemn expression. He also participated in the battle to encircle and annihilate the Void Beast. At that time, he teamed up with Blanca Mandy, Landrin Gomo, and George Lopez. The battle strength he displayed was not inferior to the three of them. Blanca Mandy, Landrin Gomo, and George Lopez were willing to team up with him. His battle strength was not inferior to the three of them. Rebecca Guzman was completely shocked. There was no doubt about the strength of the three most powerful families. Even if several top families were to join forces, they might not necessarily be a match for one of the most powerful families. Their powerful strength made the children of the three most powerful families extremely arrogant and haughty. Other than each other, they would never get involved with the children of other families. She did not expect that the three of them would make an exception and team up with the other party. What surprised her even more was that the other party's battle strength was not inferior to the three of them. She finally understood why her brother had invited him. On one hand, he was unwilling to share the Frost Moonflower with others. On the other hand, he probably had the intention of befriending the other party. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The three of them were all at the magic light level, so their speed was naturally extremely fast. Even though they were traveling on foot, they entered the Forbidden Forest after a few hours. They went deeper in, and after more than an hour, they arrived at the place where they found the Frost Moonflower. It was a lake next to a mountain, surrounded by dense trees. Although it was summer, there was a thick layer of ice on the surface of the lake. Cold air seeped out like smoke, making the entire lake look like it was shrouded in smoke. In the midst of the smoke, a palm-sized white flower that looked like it was carved out of ice bloomed leisurely. It did not emit a delicate fragrance, only wisps of cold air. It was precisely because of the cold air it emitted that a layer of ice had formed on the surface of the lake. Be careful, that blood fiend is at the bottom of the lake, Rebecca Guzman said with some lingering fear. Last time, she had almost died under the sneak attack of the blood fiend at the bottom of the lake. If she had not used her blood skill at the crucial moment, she might not have been able to escape. Gray looked at the surface of the lake and was surprised to find that they were not the only visitors. Apart from them, there was another blood fiend. This was a 7-meter-long blood fiend covered in black scales. It was a desolate level blood fiend, the Shadow Dragon. It was a desolate level blood fiend with the bloodline of a dragon. At this point, Gray naturally understood that the so-called dragon was only a rule-level blood fiend. Even a rule-level powerhouse could not be sure if a true divine beast really existed. Pa pa pa. The Shadow Dragon discovered the Frost Moonflower in the middle of the lake. It stepped on the ice and very carefully approached the Frost Moonflower. Suddenly, the ice under its feet cracked. From under the ice, a huge white mouth that looked like it was made of ice sprang out and bit its body. Crack! The huge mouth closed, and the crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. The shadow dragon struggled violently in pain, but it could not break free at all. It was dragged into the water. The surface of the lake was dyed red with blood, causing a disturbance. In the end, the disturbance subsided. The shadow dragon should be completely dead and turned into food for that giant beast. It's a demonic frost crocodile, but it's much bigger than the one described in the book. It seems that it has consumed many herbs that can promote evolution. Whether it was the blood moon grass or the frost moonflower, they both had the characteristics of increasing one's strength and promoting bloodline evolution. The demonic frost crocodile should have consumed similar magic herbs before, which was why it could grow to such a large size. I'll lure it out. Your Excellency Gray will take the opportunity to blast it out of the lake. After a simple discussion, Jonathan Gussman and Gray took action. Jonathan Gussman walked on the lake and approached the frost moonflower. Gray followed behind him with a distance. Tap, tap, tap. His leather boots stepped on the ice, producing rhythmic tapping sounds. Jonathan Gussman approached the frost moonflower at a moderate speed. If one looked closely, one would notice that his body was slightly bent, and his gaze was looking at his feet. Clearly, he was wary of the demonic frost crocodile in the lake. Crack! Suddenly, a blurry shadow appeared under the ice. Then the ice under Jonathan Gussman's feet shattered, and a huge mouth that looked like it was carved out of ice bit at Jonathan Gussman. Bang! At this moment, Jonathan Gussman stepped on the void, and his body rose in a straight line, escaping to higher ground. The demonic frost crocodile slapped the water with its tail and leaped high, biting at Jonathan Gussman. Bang! Before it could bite Jonathan Gussman, a large amount of black fog slapped its body like a huge hand. The ice-like scales on its body were instantly corroded, and blood stains appeared. The huge body that was more than 30 meters tall was sent flying far away. It was thrown out of the lake, plowing a long trail on the ground. Big Brother is right. Gray Leopold's combat power is not weaker than his. Sensing that the power of Gray's attack had definitely reached the 5th level of magic light, Rebecca Gussman narrowed her eyes with a hint of surprise. Although she did not doubt her brother's words, she could not help but be slightly surprised when she saw the combat power of the 5th level of magic light. The other party should be younger than her by a few years, but he had already surpassed her and had the combat power of the 5th level of magic light. It was hard to imagine that such a person came from a family like Leopold. Woo! The demonic frost crocodile that was sent flying got up and glared at Gray furiously. It opened its huge mouth and roared. Then, ice balls with a diameter of a meter flew toward Gray like cannonballs. Chee-chee! In front of Gray, the black fog turned into a wall. The ice balls hit the black fog wall and were instantly melted by the black fog. In the end, all the ice balls were blocked by the black fog. Chapter 722. Woo! The attack failed to hurt Gray. The demonic frost crocodile opened its mouth and tried to attack Gray again. However, before it could attack Gray again, a huge black water ball crashed into it. Bang! The black water ball was only a few meters in diameter, but it had terrifying power. Under the attack of the black water ball, the demonic frost crocodile was sent flying again with its skin torn and flesh lacerated. A mountain peak collapsed from the impact. Jonathan Gussman regained his strength and made his move. The black water ball was a dual elemental ability that was formed by a mixture of water and metal elemental abilities. The water produced by this ability had a greater weight than metal, and its power was greater than a solid metal ball that was flying at high speed. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying booms continued to sound. The mountains in the surrounding area disappeared under the battle between the two sides. The ground was flattened and full of potholes. Unsurprisingly, under the combined attack of Gray and Jonathan Gussman, who were both at the 5th level of magic light, the ridiculously large demonic frost crocodile was killed. The plucking of the frost moonflower was done by Rebecca Gussman. Gray was somewhat interested in the frost moonflower, but his interest was not as great as his interest in the puppet fox of calamity. He had obtained a large number of mana herbs from the Yuga's family's treasury, and among them, there were herbs whose value was comparable to the frost moonflower. The three of them stayed the night in the forest and returned to the Gusman family the next day. Gray quickly obtained the blood of the Fox of Calamity puppet. After declining their request to stay, Gray left the Gusman family and teleported back to the Urgash family. Looks like your injuries are almost healed. After returning to the Urgash family, Gray saw Francis. He had taken a high-level healing potion, and it had been a few days since his last injury. His injuries were almost healed. Yes, I'll be able to fully recover in a few days at most. Francis forced a smile, but he could not hide the loneliness in the depths of his eyes. To be able to elope, their feelings for each other were obviously very deep. Now that they were separated, it was normal for them to feel lonely. Thinking of Dinah, Sigh? Gray sighed and asked, "Yes." When he heard Gray mention this name, the forced smile on Francis's face suddenly collapsed, and sadness appeared on his face. There's no need to be too sad. It's not like there's no turning point between you and Dana Sigh. After a slight hesitation, Gray said, "Really?" Upon hearing Gray's words, Francis raised his head abruptly and looked at Gray with suspicion and anticipation. "Yes." Gray nodded solemnly and said, "The reason why the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family stopped you from being together with Dana Say is because they feel that your status is unworthy. So long as you join the Yuga's clan, obtain the identity of a direct descendant of the Yuga's clan, and then propose as a descendant of the Yuga's clan, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family naturally has no reason to refuse. Join the Yuga's family and become a direct descendant of the Yuga's family?" Francis frowned. This kind of joining is only in name. You only need to declare that you're a disciple of the Urgash family. I think you also understand my relationship with the Urgash family. Don't worry, this kind of joining will not bind you in any way. Gray explained. Will it work? Francis had some doubts. As far as he knew, the West Hermit Kingdom was one of the top kingdoms in the Eternal Territory. He did not think that the identity of a disciple of the Yuga's family would be useful. Seeing through the other party's thoughts, Gray chuckled. You might not understand the power of the Yuga's family. The Yuga's family has 6 Annihilation Elites. They're one of the top families in the Chaos Territory. 6 Annihilation class Elites? Francis was so shocked that he stood up from his seat. He looked at Gray with shock. He did not know how many Annihilation Elites the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family had, but it should be around that number. He did not expect the Yuga's family, where he had been staying for a few days, to have that kind of power. Gray, what about your power? He suddenly remembered that the Yuga's family had been intimidated by Gray's power. That meant Gray's power was stronger than 6 Annihilation Elites combined. I used some tricks to intimidate the Yuga's family, but I still have the power of a second-tier Annihilation class. Gray said with a smile. He trusted Francis, and he didn't mind revealing the rest of the situation, except for some extremely secret information that was inconvenient to disclose. Second-tier Annihilation class power? Francis's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He looked at Gray with shock. He was shocked. He was extremely shocked. To be able to intimidate a top-class family, he guessed that Gray had the power of an Annihilation class. He did not expect Gray's power to be Annihilation class. It was also second-tier Annihilation class. His teacher was only first-tier Annihilation class when he died. Hansen was not even 30 years old. He had reached a level his teacher could not reach. Hurry up and recover. The Yuga's family needs to prepare. When you recover, you should be able to leave for the West Hermit Kingdom. After patting Francis on the shoulder, Gray left. Francis was still in a daze. Returning to his place in the Yuga's family, Gray took out the blood of the Fox of Disaster puppet. Inside the transparent crystal bottle, there was a liquid that shone with a blue light. It also had a slightly scary presence. Gulp! He uncorked the bottle and drank it. His mouth was suddenly filled with the sweet taste of blood and some fragrance. The blood of a high-class blood beast would naturally have a medicinal fragrance. To some extent, it was no different from magic potions. The quality was even higher than normal magic potions. Hiss! It was like needles were pricking Gray's soul. Wave after wave, it was like a tide. Puppet power was a soul power. It could use the mysterious power of the soul to turn other people or creatures into its own puppet. Naturally, in order to obtain such power, one had to transform the soul. Large beads of sweat slid down Gray's forehead. Gray gritted his teeth and endured it. Finally, after what felt like a century to Gray, the transformation ended. After taking a few deep breaths, Gray felt his fatigue weaken slightly. He stood up and could not wait to check the changes he had obtained after swallowing the blood of the fox, a disaster puppet. Whoosh! His mind sent out a command to contact Kensha. The next moment, a strange feeling appeared. Gray felt as if his consciousness was quickly shuttling through space through his connection with Kensha. Soon, he found that his consciousness had entered the mind of another person. Lord Gray. Just after he entered this person's mind, he immediately heard a surprised female voice. This voice belonged to Kensha. Have Fod and the others returned? Gray responded and asked. They returned yesterday. Lord Gray, I heard that you went to the Yuga's family. Why are you back so soon? Kensha asked curiously. I'm currently in the Yuga's family. The reason why I can contact you is because I obtained a new ability. After a brief explanation, Gray had Kensha cooperate with him to feel the changes after obtaining the puppet ability. After testing it, Gray found that he could immerse himself in Kensha's situation through her 5 senses. Whether it was the fragrant flowers blooming in front of her, the faint fragrance of the flowers, or the sound of the wind rustling the leaves, he could feel it all. Moreover, he could take control of Kensha's body and control her body to fight from a distance. However, the abilities he could use were only Kensha's abilities. He could not use his own abilities of the law of time and the law of space. After canceling his connection with Kensha, Gray contacted the people of the various families scattered all over the anarchic territory. He could also communicate with them and control their bodies. As I speculated, the puppet ability and the resurrection ability are extremely compatible. They have indeed fused together. Gray was excited. Without a doubt, the reason for such a change was that the puppet ability had been fused with the resurrection ability, allowing the resurrection ability to communicate and control from a distance. With this ability, the 5 factions I control are no longer a sheet of loose sand. Very satisfied with the changes brought about by the puppet ability, Gray once again used the long-distance communication ability. However, this time, the target was not a member of a family, but Barnett Naeem, who was in the middle of a plain. Barnett Naeem, a king-class warrior of the Nahum family. He had been killed by Gray when he was seeking revenge on Gray and had been revived with the resurrection ability. Now, he was permanently stationed at Fergus Castle, protecting the safety of Fergus Castle. Whoosh! Gray's consciousness quickly traversed, getting closer and closer to Barnett Naeem. However, just as he was about to reach Barnett Naeem, he was stopped by a black barrier, unable to advance any further. Plain barrier. Gray was very familiar with this black barrier. He could tell at a glance that it was a plain barrier. After all, it was not the first time he had come into contact with a plain barrier. I did not expect the plain barrier to have an isolating effect. His consciousness returned to his body. Gray's face was full of regret. He had wanted to use this opportunity to understand the changes in the Fergus family and the plane over the past 2 years. Now, it seemed that it would not work. With the plain barrier blocking him, his consciousness could not enter Barnett Naeem's body. A few days later, Francis's body had completely recovered. The Urgas family's ruined ship rose into the air and set off for the West Hertz Kingdom. Aside from the basic personnel on the ruined ship, there was Francis, the 3 Annihilation-class elites of the Urgas family, including Joshua and Gray. After some consideration, Gray finally decided to go with them. If things did not work out, he would use his space power to take them away. Of course, this was the worst-case scenario. Chapter 723. In the garden of a huge palace, a woman with long green hair was squatting in the flower bed. She sat there quietly and did not move for a long time. The woman was wearing a green palace dress. Her facial features were exquisite and her skin was fair. However, her eyes were slightly lifeless. She looked like an exquisite doll. Tap, tap, tap. Crisp footsteps came from behind her. They came from afar and finally came to her back. However, she was still motionless like a doll. Don't you want to know about him? A crisp female voice rang out. Behind her, a young woman in a white court dress spoke. The young woman in the white dress also had long green hair. Her appearance was similar to the squatting young woman in the green dress. They were both extremely exquisite. "Sister, do you have news about him?" The young woman in the green dress finally looked back at the young woman in the white dress behind her. Her eyes were filled with apprehension and fear. Obviously, she was very afraid of hearing the news that she did not want to hear the most. "Yes, the people sent by the family to hunt him down have just returned today." The young woman in the white dress nodded. "Sister, how is he?" The young woman in the green dress suddenly stood up and grabbed the shoulders of the young woman in the white dress. Her body trembled slightly, and her eyes were filled with tears. "Don't worry, he's fine." The young woman in the white dress sighed in her heart and said, "Really? Sister, you're not lying to me?" The young woman in the green dress looked at the young woman in the white dress with surprise and fear. She was surprised by this news and afraid that this news was false. "It's true. I promise, it's true." The young woman in the white dress reached out and touched the head of the young woman in the green dress. Her voice was filled with certainty. "Then why do the people sent by the royal family to hunt him down withdraw?" The young woman in the green dress asked doubtfully. She was naturally very happy that the people sent by the royal family to hunt him down had been withdrawn. However, she knew very well that their elopement this time made the royal family feel very embarrassed. The royal family would never stop until they killed him, because they had to give up the chase. The young woman in the white dress said with a smile. They had to give up the chase. "Sister, what's going on?" The young woman in the green dress looked at the young woman in the white dress in surprise. Vicente found him hiding in a ruined ship, so he stopped the ruined ship and threatened the ruined ship's owner to hand him over. In the end, there were 6 Annihilation-class elites and a few dozen Demon Light warriors on the ruined ship. Vicente almost died and made it back. Thinking of Deacon Vicente's lingering fear when he returned from the pursuit, the woman in the white dress revealed a trace of a smile. 6 Annihilation-class elites and dozens of Magic Light warriors. The young woman in the green dress couldn't help but open her mouth wide in shock. Even the strength of the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom was only at this level. Yet, such a runic ship actually possessed such strength. She could imagine how terrified and devastated Deacon Vicente must have been when he went to chase after them. "Which family does that runic ship belong to? Why are you protecting him?" The young woman in the green dress couldn't help but ask as her mood improved. Judging from the emblem, it should be the Yuga's family, one of the top families in the Chaos territory. The reason for protecting him should be because he knows this family and has a deep relationship with them. The woman in the white dress smiled. "If I knew he had such a deep relationship with the Yuga's family, which is one of the top families in the Chaos territory, the family wouldn't have dared to send people to kill him." The West Hermit Kingdom was one of the top kingdoms in the Eternal territory. In terms of power, they were no weaker than the Yuga's family. However, although they were no weaker than the Yuga's family, they didn't want to become enemies with such a family. The royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom was a family that cared a lot about benefits. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stopped Francis from dating Dana West Hermit after his teacher had died. Becoming enemies with such a top family for Francis was obviously not in the interest of the royal family of the West Hermit Kingdom. 10 days later, the Yuga's family's runic ship left the Chaos territory and entered the Eternal territory. Ahead is the border of the West Hermit Kingdom. On the deck of the runic ship, Francis looked at a stronghold in the distance with a strange feeling in his heart. More than a month ago, he had escaped from this place into the Forbidden Forest. His future was unknown. More than a month later, he had returned. This time, he had come openly. The huge difference between before and after gave birth to an indescribable feeling in his heart. He looked at Gray with eyes full of gratitude. The reason why he was able to appear here in broad daylight after more than a month was because of Gray. It was because of Gray that he was able to return here. The runic ship slowed down and slowly approached the stronghold. On the deck, Josh and the other 2 Annihilation-class elites had a faint presence. They revealed their identities as Annihilation-class elites. They felt the presence of the 3 of them, which was very faint but very scary. The fortress became very nervous. Although it was an important place near the border, there was only one Annihilation class elite guarding it. If 3 Annihilation class elites attacked the fortress's power would not be able to withstand them. So, in the stronghold, there was only one Annihilation class elite. He was a middle-aged man with a beard. He approached the runic ship and landed on the deck. The middle-aged man's face looked serious. He was Annihilation class elite. He recognized the top family, the Urgash family's family emblem. He had heard about what had happened between the kings and the Urgash family. Now that the Urgash family was there, it made him feel uneasy. He glanced at the 3 Aegis elites with Annihilation class auras and asked politely, "Why have you come, Yuga's family?" "We are here to visit the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty." Josh looked at the middle-aged man and nodded. "Visit the royalty?" The middle-aged man took a deep look at Joshua. He couldn't figure out the purpose of the Urgas family's visit, so he pondered for a moment before speaking. After thinking for a while, he said, "Please rest in the stronghold. I will send someone to inform the royalty." Okay. The runic ship landed in the stronghold. Gray and the others were led to a room in the stronghold. News about them quickly spread to the West Hermit Kingdom's capital. After receiving the news from the stronghold, the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty immediately called for a high-level meeting. "What do you think?" West Hermit Kingdom's King Bowen West Hermit, a man with a strong aura of a leader, asked as he looked at the people in the meeting room. Obviously, they are not friendly. The royalty has just chased Francis, who is related to the Yugas family. Not long after, the Yugas family will come to visit. They're not friendly. An old man with a bald head in the middle said, "This is too much. The royalty has already given up on chasing Francis. What else does the Yugas family want? Do they think the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty is easy to bully?" Another old man said with a cold look in his eyes, "It is best if we can avoid becoming enemies with the Yugas family, especially during these special times." A woman wearing a precious gem necklace whose age could not be determined said with a serious face, "On the west border, the Tuya Kingdom, whose power was not as strong as the West Hermit Kingdom, had sent more troops to the border. If there was a conflict with the Yugas family at this time, it could lead to the West Hermit Kingdom fighting on 2 fronts. Facing 2 factions that were not weaker than the West Hermit Kingdom was a very dangerous situation. I hope it is not the worst-case scenario," a middle-aged man said with a frown. After some discussion, the royalty of the West Hermit Kingdom finally agreed to the Yugas family's visit. While sending people to the fortress to receive the Yugas family, the royal capital also quickly made preparations to welcome them. Although the Yugas family might not be friendly, as a royalty of the kingdom, basic etiquette was still necessary. 2 days later, the runic ship arrived at the royal capital of the West Hermit Kingdom. It slowly landed in the square of the royal capital of the West Hermit Kingdom and entered the royal palace under the warm welcome of the West Hermit Kingdom's royalty. In the huge hall, the West Hermit Kingdom's King Bowen West sat in the main seat. The upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom in gray and the others sat on the left and right sides of the hall. The atmosphere was heavy. Bowen West Hermit Kingdom's king glanced at Gray and the others. After pausing for a moment on Francis, he asked in a deep voice, "May I know why the Yugas family has come this time?" "Your Majesty, the Yugas family is visiting the West Hermit Kingdom for our family's disciple, Francis, to propose to Dana West Hermit." Joshua glanced at Francis next to him and said solemnly, "Don't worry." Chapter 724. Marriage Alliance? The Yugas family came for a marriage alliance? In an instant, the solemn atmosphere in the hall collapsed. The upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom looked at each other and sighed softly. They couldn't help but be stunned. The war with the Tuya Kingdom could break out at any time. At this tense moment, their nerves couldn't help but tense up and become overly sensitive. They couldn't help but think of war whenever something happened. Therefore, when they learned of the Yugas family's arrival, their first thought was that the Yugas family came with ill intentions and came to demand an explanation for Francis, who was being hunted down. As for a marriage alliance, they really didn't think about it. Bowen Sai couldn't help but sigh softly in his heart. It was fine as long as they didn't come with ill intentions. Fighting on 2 fronts would be too disadvantageous for the West Hermit Kingdom. He looked at Joshua with some doubts and asked, "Your Excellency just said that Francis is a descendant of the Yugas family, but I remember that Francis' surname should be Violet, right? Violet is Francis' mother's surname. To be honest, Francis ran away from home a few years ago due to some matters, and there hasn't been any news of him since. It was only a while ago that we accidentally discovered him." Joshua said with a sigh, "I see." In the hall, the upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family came to a realization. Because he ran away from home and didn't want the family to find him, he changed his surname to his mother's. This was just a willful action of a runaway child. No matter how he changed his surname, his identity as a descendant of the Yugas family would not change. That explains it. Some of the upper echelons of the West Hermit Kingdom couldn't help but recall some investigations on Francis. The investigations speculated that he had received an extremely rigorous education in ancient aristocratic etiquette, and such education only existed in ancient families. Since he was a descendant of a Yugas family, then it made sense. As a family that wasn't inferior to the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, the aristocratic education their descendants received was naturally extremely rigorous. "Your Majesty, this time my family came with sincerity. I hope Your Majesty can allow it," Joshua said solemnly as he looked at the king of Westhertz, Bowen Sirts. "Your Excellency, Joshua, the royal family can feel the sincerity of a Yugas family. However, the royal family has to carefully consider such a big matter as a marriage alliance." Westhertz's king, Bowen Syh, said with some hesitation. From the perspective of gains and losses, it was indeed a good choice to form a marriage alliance with the Yugas family. They could immediately gain a powerful ally. However, his daughter, Dana Sai, was a rare and precious chess piece. From the looks of it, the market wasn't bad. He had to maximize the benefits. Perhaps there was a marriage partner more suitable than the Yugas family. We naturally understand this, but we still hope to receive an answer as soon as possible. After all, we can't stay in the West Hermit Kingdom for long. Joshua could roughly guess the other party's thoughts, and a trace of disdain appeared in his heart. However, on the surface, he smiled and did not mind. Even the Urgash family couldn't do such a thing. The Urgash family's ruthlessness was mainly targeted at outsiders. They had always been very good to their own family members, but the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family didn't even let their own family members go. He didn't care about the other party waiting for the best offer. The marriage was only the first step. If the marriage didn't work, then he would have to resort to extreme measures. He was very clear about Gray's plan. Of course, West Hermit King Bowen Sai laughed. He thought that the response from the four factions should be coming soon. In fact, he stopped Dana Sai and Francis because he wanted to form a marriage alliance with the four factions. "Your Majesty, urgent military situation." Suddenly, a man in battle armor walked quickly into the hall. After bowing to West Hermit King Bowen Sai, he said in a hurried voice, "Hand it over." West Hermit King Bowen Sai waved his hand. Someone took the letter from the man in battle armor and handed it to West Hermit King Bowen Sai. West Hermit King Bowen Sai opened the letter. The next moment, his expression turned ugly. Suddenly, he had a thought and looked at Joshua. "I'm ashamed. I'm afraid I'll have to break my promise to the Yugas family." "Oh, why is that?" Joshua asked with a surprised expression. The border war between the West Hermit Kingdom and the Tuya Kingdom has already broken out. At this time, the royal family really doesn't have the energy to consider the marriage alliance, so I'm afraid we won't be able to give the Yugas family an answer in a short period of time. West Hermit King Bowen Sai said with the ashamed expression. "In that case, it's indeed not the time to consider the marriage alliance. My Yugas family will take our leave first. We'll come again after the war is over," Joshua said regretfully. With that, Joshua and the other members of the Yugas family stood up and pretended to leave. Francis was very reluctant to leave, but under Gray's signal, he also stood up and prepared to leave. "Everyone from the Yugas family, please wait." West Hermit King Bowen Sai's expression stiffened when he saw the Yugas family preparing to leave. This was completely different from the answer he had expected. He originally thought that the Urgus family would lend a helping hand. After all, although the marriage alliance didn't succeed, they still had the intention. He didn't expect the Urgus family to simply leave. He smiled awkwardly and called out to the people of the Urgus family. The Tuya kingdom is closing in step by step. Now that the West Hermit Kingdom is in urgent need of strength, I wonder if the Urgus family can lend a helping hand? Lend a helping hand? Joshua shook his head without hesitation. I'm sorry, the Urgus family doesn't have any conflict with the Tuya kingdom. I really don't want to provoke such a force. If it's a marriage alliance with the West Hermit Kingdom, it's fine. As for now, I can only apologize. With that, Joshua turned to leave with the people of the Urgus family. Sir Joshua, please wait a moment. West Hermit King Bowen Sai hesitated. After a moment of hesitation, he called out to the people of the Urgus family again. Well, now that the West Hermit Kingdom is in danger, if Dana can marry into the Urgus family, she'll be able to get the protection of the Urgus family. Even if the kingdom is destroyed, she'll be able to survive. In addition, she and Francis do have feelings for each other. As a father, I also hope that he can be happy. I've decided to agree to this marriage alliance. West Hermit King Bowen Sai put on a fatherly face, but only he knew what he was really thinking. He could see that the Urgus family was trying to threaten him, but now that there was a war with the Tuya kingdom was very aggressive. They were in urgent need of strength. Urgus had 3 Annihilation class elites with him. He had to get them over no matter what. So, he could only agree for now and keep them in check. Although he had agreed, it did not mean he could not go back on his word. If there was a more suitable family than the Urgus family after the war, he could go back on his word. As for the reason, he could have as many as he wanted. Since the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family is related by marriage, the Urgus family cannot sit idly by when the Tuya kingdom invades the West Hermit Kingdom. The Urgus family is willing to help. Joshua smiled and led the people of the Urgus family to sit down again. This is great. With the help of the Urgus family, the West Hermit Kingdom will win this war. Seeing the marriage between the West Hermit Kingdom and the Urgus family succeed, and the Urgus family was willing to help, the West Hermit Kingdom's higher-ups were very excited. With the power of the West Hermit Kingdom and the 3 Annihilation class elites, they were sure to win this war. Although they had sacrificed a woman, using a woman as the price to win the war was definitely worth it. The West Hermit Kingdom's royal family started to prepare for departure. Gray and the others were arranged to stay in a luxurious courtyard in the West Hermit Kingdom's royal palace. Gray, thank you so much. Francis could no longer hide his excitement. He spoke to Gray with great emotion. You are welcome. Gray shook his head. He had a playful look on his face as he joked. Let's go. Take me to see the woman you have been dreaming about. In the past, Francis would make fun of him and Sophia. Now, he finally had a chance to make fun of him. He could not help but want to make fun of him. Facing Gray's teasing, Francis' face turned red, which was rare. He still led the way. This way, Gray wanted to see Dana Sai, but he wanted to see Dana Sai even more. They had been apart for a month. His heart was filled with longing. Gray's words had completely stimulated his longing. His longing was like a flood that had broken through a dam. Because it was a marriage alliance, the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family had no reason to stop them. Gray and Francis went all the way to Dana Sai's residence without any obstructions. Dana, Francis. In the garden of this residence, Gray and Francis saw a beautiful woman wearing a long green dress. She had long green hair, a delicate face, and a slender body. She was a woman as beautiful as an elf. She was the woman Francis had been dreaming about, Dana Sai. Francis could not help but call out her name and walk over. She ran all the way into Francis's arms. The two of them hugged each other passionately. The meeting of lovers, especially lovers who had experienced life and death together, was destined to be full of affection. Looking at the two of them who were full of affection, Gray felt a little awkward. He seemed to be unnecessary. He shrugged and hurriedly left the way he had come, leaving the couple alone. In his mind, the silhouette of a purple-haired woman flashed past, and he wondered where she was now. Chapter 725. A day later, Gray and the others arrived at the western border of the West Hermit Kingdom with the reinforcements of the royal family. Kill. Between the barren mountain ridges that were originally covered in dense forests, the ground was full of crisscrossing scars. Mountain ridges had collapsed under the attacks, and the tragic sounds of fighting rose and fell one after another. Blood dyed the ground red, and a strong smell of blood filled the air. Severed limbs and corpses could be seen everywhere, and the number was increasing from time to time. There were people fighting both on the ground and in the sky. The side fighting on the ground was desolate level or below, while the side fighting in the sky was king level or even magic light. The powerful destructive power forced them to fight in the sky. Otherwise, the people around them, whether enemies or companions, would die under the aftermath of their battle. One side was wearing green battle suits, while the other side was wearing black battle suits. It was obvious that the side wearing green battle suits was losing ground, while the side wearing black battle suits was gaining momentum. The side wearing green armor was the army of the West Hermit Kingdom. Their fortress had been lost, and now they were retreating while fighting. However, the side of the Tuya Kingdom wearing black armor obviously had no intention of letting them go, and was chasing them relentlessly. Kill. The West Hermit Kingdom's reinforcements quickly joined in and pounced on the side of the Tuya Kingdom wearing black armor. Buffed. Gray brushed past a king-level warrior in black battle armor. He didn't use his blood fiend ability. Just by relying on his physical strength, he cut the king-level warrior in half along with his weapon and body. Crash. Raging purple flames wrapped around Francis's spear, and he stabbed at a king-level warrior who was surrounded by cold air and had ice ability. The white cold air disintegrated in an instant. The king-level warrior with ice ability had no time to dodge, and he was wrapped in purple flames, screaming as he fell to the ground. Both Gray and Francis were part of the West Hermit Kingdom's reinforcements. The Yugas family had a marriage alliance with the West Hermit Kingdom. As the marriage partner, Francis naturally had to express his gratitude, so he joined the West Hermit Kingdom's reinforcements. On the other hand, Gray naturally couldn't watch Francis fight without participating in the battle, so he also joined the West Hope Kingdom's reinforcements. In addition to the two of them, many young people from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family were among the reinforcements. Dana Say, her sister Valita Say, and her brother Hall Say were among them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. After killing several king-level warriors in a row, a magic light warrior from the Tuya Kingdom set his eyes on Gray. He clawed at Gray with his fist and claws. Suddenly, several huge green wind blades, tens of meters long, attacked Gray. The people who were fighting along the way, regardless of whether they were from the Western Ho Kingdom or the Tuya Kingdom, were all sent flying by the strong wind generated by the huge wind blade. In front of Gray, the black mist turned into a huge black mist column and smashed toward the magic light warriors of the Tuya Kingdom. All the wind blades were destroyed. The black mist column hit the magic light warriors of the Tuya Kingdom before they could react. Under the terrifying corrosive power of the black mist, the Tuya Kingdom's magic light warrior screamed. The warrior's flesh and blood quickly disappeared. His body quickly disintegrated, leaving only a pile of white bones on the ground. Gabby dammit! Seeing the tragic death of the magic light warrior, a young man in a black battle suit covered in blood roared and rushed towards Gray with murderous intent in his eyes. The saber glowed with a golden light. Just by passing by, a king-level warrior from the Western Ho Kingdom exploded under the terrifying aura of sharpness. The attack power attached to the sword was enough to reach the 5th level of magic light. Clang! Gray's sword was wrapped in black mist. He blocked the attack with a horizontal block and quickly slashed at the young man with his sword. Clang, clang, clang. Gray's sword collided with the young man's battle sword. The aftermath of the black mist and the golden light splashed in all directions like cannonballs. Some of the king-level warriors who were affected by the attacks were injured on the spot. Seeing this, the king-level warriors who were fighting around them could not help but retreat in shock. With Gray and the young man as the center, the area within a radius of a few hundred meters became a forbidden zone. He actually blocked, Randy Tuya. The three royal siblings of the West Hermit Kingdom could not help but be slightly surprised when they saw Gray fighting the young man without showing any signs of losing. To be able to reach the 5th level of magic light at such a young age, the young man who was fighting with Gray was naturally not simple. His name was Randy Tuya, and he was the strongest member of the younger generation of the Tuya Kingdom's royal family. In the past battles, among the younger generation of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family, only the eldest prince, Hall C, could block him. Now, Gray was blocking him without showing any signs of losing, which surprised him slightly. Clang, clang, clang. After dozens of consecutive exchanges, Randy Tuya retreated and distanced himself from Gray. He looked at Gray with fear. "You're not from the West Hermit Kingdom. Who are you?" With such strength at such a young age, if the other party was from the West Hermit Kingdom, the Tuya Kingdom spies in the West Hermit Kingdom should have known about him before this. "I'm indeed not from the West Hermit Kingdom. Let me give you a piece of advice. Withdraw your troops quickly, or you'll lose miserably." With a pair of greenish-black wings growing out of his back, Gray hovered in the sky and said with a lack of interest. He did not have any ill feelings toward the Tuya Kingdom. It was not because the Tuya Kingdom's invasion had done them a great favor and allowed the marriage to be successful. He had to thank the Tuya Kingdom for that. However, since the Urga's family had already joined the West Hermit Kingdom through marriage, they naturally had to express their gratitude. Therefore, they had no choice but to come and participate in the war. Since he did not have any ill feelings toward the Tuya Kingdom, he naturally hoped that the Tuya Kingdom could withdraw their troops as soon as possible and end this war. Arrogant. Randy Tuya coldly grunted and attacked Gray again. Gray's appearance gave him a bad feeling. However, the Tuya Kingdom had been preparing for this war for a long time. They had also arranged for backup. Naturally, they would not retreat so easily. Randy did not have that much power either. With the addition of reinforcements, the West Hermit Kingdom's side clearly had the upper hand. Whether it was in the sky or on the ground, the battle was tilted toward the West Hermit Kingdom. Boom! Behind the Tuya Kingdom, an Annihilation-class elite could not help but attack. The scary blood beast power turned into a giant hand and slammed down. A West Hermit Kingdom Magic Light Tier 5 elite was hit and flew backward while spitting out blood. A few bones in his body were broken. Boom! Just as the Tuya Kingdom Annihilation-class elite was about to attack again and kill the West Hermit Kingdom Magic Light Tier 5 elite, behind the West Hermit Kingdom, the scary blood beast power turned into a giant claw and blocked the giant hand. The wild shockwave hit the King-class warriors of the two kingdoms and made them spit out blood. Even the Magic Light warriors could not help but fall back. The Annihilation-class elites of both sides started to fight. It meant that the battle had reached its climax. In this war, the most important thing was the clash between the Annihilation-class elites. Although the clash between the Annihilation-class elites could weaken the overall power of the other kingdom, it was not decisive. Only the clash between the Annihilation-class elites could decide the outcome of this war. Everyone below Magic Light, retreat. The two kingdoms did not hesitate to order the Blood Warriors below Magic Light to retreat. In the face of an Annihilation-class clash, even the shockwave was a disaster for those below Magic Light. Boom! Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the sky, the Magic Light battlefield was supposed to be in the center. It was now occupied by a dozen people from both sides. The Magic Light warriors who were fighting each other were fighting and retreating. They did not want to become victims of the Annihilation-class attacks. Buzz! A scary shockwave spread out from the center of the battle. Even the clouds were torn apart. The sky, which had been filled with thick white clouds, was now clear. On the ground, the shockwave would occasionally sweep across. Suddenly, a deep trench that was a few miles long appeared. Hot light flashed in the center. White, gold, purple. The hot light was very bright. It was like a sun of many different colors were blooming in the sky. The West Ho Kingdom had 6 Annihilation-class elites. The Tuya Kingdom also had 6 Annihilation-class elites. It seemed to be a battle of equal power. In the next moment, something strange happened in the Magic Light. Blurg! An old man with messy hair suddenly exploded with annihilation class power. He punched the magic light warrior he was fighting and blew him apart. A middle-aged man with neatly combed hair suddenly exploded with annihilation class power. He cut the magic light warrior he was fighting in half. Then, the two of them each went toward a West Ho Kingdom annihilation class elite who was fighting someone else. Facing the two of them, the two annihilation class elites of the West Ho Kingdom were at a disadvantage. One of them was punched in the stomach. He spat out blood and flew away. The other had a serious wound on his body. Tuya Kingdom, is this what gives you the confidence to start a war with the West Ho Kingdom? Among the annihilation class elites of the West Ho Kingdom, a tall old man's face was green. The Tuya Kingdom was supposed to have 7 annihilation class elites, just like the West Ho Kingdom, which had lost one of their consecrators. Aside from the one who could not leave the stronghold, both sides should have had the same number of annihilation class elites. Now, the Tuya Kingdom had 2 more annihilation class elites. It is too late to find out now. In the Tuya Kingdom, a tall, skinny old man laughed proudly. Among the 2 new annihilation class elites, one of them was a consecrator that had been hired in recent years. The other one was someone in the family who had broken through annihilation class. After learning that one of the consecrators of the West Ho Kingdom had died, and they had 2 more annihilation class elites on their side, the Tuya Kingdom could not help but think of attacking the West Ho Kingdom. They wanted to take the West Ho Kingdom's land and resources. That was why the war had started. Chapter 726. It's too early to laugh. The big old man from West Ho Kingdom's face was no longer green. He looked disdainful as he spoke politely. My friend from the Urgash family, please do something. So. Following his voice, Joshua and the other 3 Urgash family annihilation elites quickly flew into the sky. 2 of them went to help the 2 annihilation elites from West Ho Kingdom who were being attacked. The other went to attack an annihilation elite from Tuya Kingdom. Poof! The poisonous shadows that blotted out the sky turned into sharp blades and attacked this person. This person dodged several of the blades, but he was still hit by several of them. Many parts of his body were injured, and he could not stabilize his body and crashed into the ground. His wounds turned green, and it was obvious that he had been poisoned. The Urgash family? The top family in Chaos territory, the Urgash family? This time, it was the skinny old man from Tuya Kingdom who looked green. He looked at Joshua and the other 2 and angrily scolded them. Urgash family, the Tuya Kingdom has no grudge against you. Why are you helping the West Ho Kingdom attack the Tuya Kingdom? We have no choice. The Urgash family and the West Ho Kingdom's king have a marriage alliance. Joshua shrugged helplessly. A marriage alliance? West Ho Kingdom, what a good plan. The skinny old man from Tuya Kingdom stared at the tall old man from West Ho Kingdom. The tall old man from West Ho Kingdom smiled proudly. You are from the Urgash family? Randy Tuya stared at Gray with anger in his eyes. The appearance of Joshua and the other 2 made him guess who Gray was. The Urgash family was one of the top families in Chaos territory. Their family's power was not much weaker than the Tuya Kingdom's. As a member of that family, it was not hard to understand why he had the power to fight him. You could say that. Gray nodded. The Urgash family belonged to him. He was from the Urgash family, so it was not wrong to think that way. The Urgash family, I will remember. Randy Tuya's face was green. His battle sword was shining with gold light. The golden light became a battle sword that was a few meters long. It tore through the air and created ripples. It was like a golden light was attacking Gray. Clang! Gray's sword was shrouded in black mist. With a sweep of his sword, he blocked the surging sword. Then, he waved his sword continuously, clashing with his opponent's saber in the air. From time to time, the white clouds that drifted over were riddled with holes and torn to shreds by their attacks. There was no doubt that the combat strength of the 2 was evenly matched. Of course, this was the result of Gray holding back. Gray did not have a good impression of the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. Naturally, he did not intend to eliminate any future troubles for them. It was better to leave an enemy like this young man, who possessed great strength and potential, alive for the West Hermit Kingdom. Boom, boom, boom. A bright light shone in the sky. It was so bright that people could not open their eyes. It was like many suns were blooming in the sky. Every Annihilation class elite was like a sun. In the end, the battle ended with the defeat of the Tuya Kingdom. With one less person, the Tuya Kingdom's Annihilation class elites were defeated. In this battle, the Tuya Kingdom had lost many people below Annihilation class. The 8 Annihilation class elites were all injured. Gray had asked Josh to maintain his combat strength at the first tier of Annihilation class. He was holding back. The West Hermit Kingdom's royal family was selfish. Gray thought it was best to leave a powerful enemy for the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. He wanted them to realize the importance of their ally, the Urgus family. Otherwise, they might regret the marriage between Francis and Dana West Hermit. The marriage with the Urgus family must be maintained, and his worries were clearly not unfounded. After they defeated the Tuya Kingdom and returned to the West Hermit Kingdom's capital, King Bowent West Hermit's attitude became ambiguous. He had the thought of finding an excuse to postpone the marriage between the two. After learning that the Tuya Kingdom had 8 Annihilation class elites in the battle, the West Hermit Kingdom's power was weaker than the Tuya Kingdom's. He immediately dismissed the idea. The Tuya Kingdom's power had greatly increased. The West Hermit Kingdom could not stop them on their own. At a critical moment, they might have to ask the Urgus family for help. The marriage with the Urgus family was necessary. He did not only have one daughter. Aside from Dana, he had another daughter. She could be used as a tool to form alliances with other factions. He did not need to do anything to the marriage. After staying in the West Hermit Kingdom's capital for a while, Gray and the others left the West Hermit Kingdom and returned to the Urgus family. Of course, Dana West Hermit was in their group. Aside from that, there were also people from the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. In the Urgus family, they held a grand wedding. From the preparation to the end, the wedding took a month. Francis and Dana West finally became husband and wife. Gray, I do not know how to thank you. Francis was very grateful to Gray. Originally, he had thought that his life would be filled with regrets, and that he and Dana would only be able to spend the rest of their lives in mutual longing. However, with Gray's help, he had made up for this regret and was able to live happily with the person he loved. There is no need for that between us. Gray shook his head. Whether it was from the perspective of a friend or from the perspective of Sophia's elder brother, he could not help. If you really want to thank me, you and Dana can stay in the Urgus family. Just treat it as monitoring the Urgus family for me. You are not going to stay here for a long time? Francis looked at Gray in confusion. Yes, the Urgus family is just a family that I have subdued recently. Previously, I also subdued a top family called Leopold. My identity to the outside world is also that of a disciple of the Leopold family. Gray nodded. There is another top family? Francis looked at Gray in astonishment. He looked at Gray as if he was looking at a monster. Just the Urgus family alone was almost as powerful as the West Hermit Kingdom's royal family. He did not expect that this was not all of Gray's forces. He actually had another top family under his control. It is just a family at the bottom of the top families. It is much weaker than the Urgus family. Gray explained with a smile. That is still very impressive. Francis sighed again and again. He did not know what to say. Compared to Leyland, his 2 years in the Origin world could be described as nothing. However, he did not regret it, because he had found his other half to spend the rest of his life with. He was already very satisfied. Whether it is the Urgus family or the Leopold family, they are both families that are subdued by brute force. There is a possibility of them rebelling at any time. I need to go back and watch over the Leopold family, so I hope you can monitor the Urgus family for me. Gray said with a slightly solemn expression. These words were not all lies. Not everyone in the Urgus family was controlled by the resurrection ability. Many of them were subdued. It was hard to guarantee that they would not have any thoughts after he left. Don't worry, I will pay more attention. Francis nodded solemnly and then sighed. Speaking of which, you really surprised me. It has only been 2 years since we came to the Origin world. Not only have you become so strong, but you also have such a powerful force. It has been 2 years. Francis's words made Gray fall into deep thought. I really want to return to the plane. Return to the plane? Don't do that. It is too dangerous. Hearing Gray's words, Francis quickly stopped him. His current knowledge was naturally not comparable to when he was in the plane. It was also because of this that he understood the terror of a sacred temple. Every single Saint Tier organization was a terrifying organization. They were organizations that could easily wipe out peak clans. Even now, when he thought about it, he could not help but rejoice. Fortunately, he had the random teleportation orb. Otherwise, the four of them would have died under the pursuit of the Radiant Saint Hall. Although Gray was not weak now, he would definitely encounter the Radiant Saint Palace if he returned to the plane. Francis was not optimistic about Gray's current conflict with the Radiant Saint Palace. It would be like throwing an egg at a rock. I don't plan on returning right now. I just thought about it. Gray shook his head. He obviously understood the terror of the Radiant Saint Palace. He also understood that with his current strength, he definitely could not contend against the Radiant Saint Palace. However, with his ability of the laws of space, he did not necessarily have to encounter the Radiant Saint Palace if he wanted to enter the plane. Moreover, he did not plan on setting off right now. He planned to increase his cultivation by 2 or 3 more realms before setting off. Currently, he possessed a large amount of cultivation resources. In particular, after encircling the nothingness beasts, he had obtained a large number of crystal cores from the 4 clans. With the crystal cores and supplementary cultivation resources, he believed that his strength would grow rapidly in the next 2 or 3 years. When the crystal cores were used up, his cultivation would probably increase by 2 or 3 realms. By then, with his strength and teleportation, he would be able to deal with most threats. Even if he could not defeat them, he should be able to escape. Chapter 727. After returning to the Leopold clan, Gray no longer went out and began to cultivate in peace. During this period, many top clans sent out invitations to the Leopold clan, whose reputation was gradually spreading. Gray did not follow them and left everything to Fod. He spent most of his time cultivating blood spells, blood skills, and learning alchemy. The blood spells he was currently cultivating were blood spells called Frostfire Ape, the blood spells in the spatial rulebook. Because he did not have the corresponding 4 elemental bloodline, he could not cultivate them. However, with his current power, it was naturally easy to find a suitable blood spells. Time flew by quickly as he cultivated. 3 years later, I finally reached the annihilation grade. Feeling the terrifying power that filled his body and the huge and solid blood power vortex in his heart, Gray let out a long sigh. In 3 years, he had advanced from the 3rd grade of Magic Light to the Annihilation grade. On average, he had advanced by 1 grade per year. 1 grade had even advanced from the Magic Light grade to the Annihilation grade. This speed of advancement was not slow, but could be described as terrifying. The higher the grade, the more difficult it was to advance. The Magic Light grade could still maintain the speed of advancing by 1 grade per year. Even the saints and saintesses of the various temples could not achieve this. Under normal circumstances, Gray was the same. Even if he had the second metamorphosis state that could accelerate the advancement of his strength, he could not do it. The reason he could do it was because he had a large number of auxiliary cultivation potions and precious crystal cores. Under the dual effects of these 2 precious resources, he was able to advance at such a fast speed. However, this was the limit of what he could do at the moment. With the supply from the 5 top clans, the auxiliary cultivation potions were sufficient, but there was not a single crystal core left. These things could only be produced from the bodies of void beasts in the Void Zone. Moreover, the Void Zone was invaded by the Origin World and was not easy to come across, so there was no place to buy them. Even the clans who had them would not sell them. After all, these things and auxiliary cultivation potions were not mutually exclusive. If they could be used at the same time, they would not even have enough for themselves, let alone sell them. Perhaps only the factions of the temples would have a certain level of production. After all, contenders of the natural order could survive in the Void Zone, but there would not be many of them. Rule-level contenders were existences at the apex of the world. Why would they focus on hunting void beasts? Occasionally, when they needed to enter the Void Zone, they would hunt some void beasts. It's been 5 years. It's time for me to return to my realm. I wonder how the Fergus family is doing, and how the realm is doing. Gray's eyes became firm as he made a decision. Annihilation class, time rule power, and space rule power. Now, regardless of whether it was his power or his ability to protect himself, he was extremely strong. It was time for him to go back. Before that, I need to carefully consider my future cultivation. According to the Space Rule book, the practice after Annihilation class was split into 2 parts. One aspect was the transformation of one's ability. To put it simply, it was to temper one's blood force, body, and soul through the corresponding secret technique to promote the transformation of one's blood force, body, and soul. Then, through the transformation of one's body, it would promote the transformation of the other 2. Completing one metamorphosis was called the second level of Annihilation class. Completing 2 metamorphoses was called the third level of Annihilation class, and so on. The second aspect was the implantation of new blood vessels to master more blood beast abilities. This was a dangerous process that required a strong body. It also required the assistance of special magic potions that lowered the activity of the blood vessels. Even so, it was still very dangerous. If one was not careful, they could become a beast that lost its mind due to the conflict of the blood vessels, or their realm would drop. However, although this process was dangerous, it was necessary. Only people with an affinity body could avoid it. Every single type of ability could only trigger one metamorphosis. To reach the 6th level of Annihilation class, a total of 5 abilities were needed. In other words, a complete rule power was needed. Because of the uniqueness of rule power only existing in blood beasts, directly obtaining a rule power through implantation was not possible. Implantation of a second or even a third type of blood vessels was necessary unless one did not want to progress further. Time rule power and space rule power. Which rule power should I use to transform first? Gray, who now had more than 10 types of blood beast abilities, did not need to consider implantation of a new blood vessel. Now, he needed to consider which rule power should he use to transform his 5 abilities. The Space Rule book had the secrets of thunder, metal, water, shadow, and earth element metamorphosis. It also had the supplementary potions needed. Gray had the Annihilation class blood skills of Leopold, the Vega family, the Ugarth family, the Tulii family, and the Donny family. He had also pieced together the time rule powers metamorphosis secrets and the supplementary potions needed. Now, he needed to make a choice. Which rule power should he use as the first metamorphosis ability? The time rule power is something I have pieced together from the 5 families. The space rule power's secret skill comes from the space book. It must have come from a Holy Palace faction. After thinking for a while, Gray made a decision. He chose the space rule power. The time rule power secret skill was something he had pieced together from the 5 families. It did not seem to be of a high level. Otherwise, Joshua would not have been the only one in the 5 families who had reached the 2nd level of Annihilation class. The space rule power secret skill came from the space book. It must have been a book that belonged to the Holy Palace faction. As the blood skills of the Holy Palace faction, the secret skill recorded in it would not be of a low level. Comparing the 2, the space rule power was a better choice. With the super memory ability, he would never forget anything he had seen. After reviewing the corresponding secret techniques of the 5 spatial laws in his mind, Gray began to try to cultivate them. I will choose Thunder as the first metamorphosis ability. The first transformation ability he chose was Lightning. According to the secret method recorded in the Space Rule book, he needed to form a special lightning rune in his body with the power of blood. Then, he would insert this lightning rune into the power of blood vortex and use the power of the lightning rune to promote the transformation of the power of blood. 1 pattern, 2 patterns, 3 patterns. After confirming there were no mistakes, Gray started to build the lightning rune in his body. His super memory ability allowed him to have absolute memory. He would never forget anything he saw. The lightning pattern was completely memorized in his mind. Even so, it took him an hour to complete the construction of the lightning rune. That was because the lightning rune was too complicated. It was made up of tens of thousands of patterns. Even if he did not make a single mistake, it still took him a long time. Fortunately, when he got used to it, the time it took to build it would be shorter. Otherwise, every practice would take an hour to prepare. The time he spent practicing would be much less. Crack, pitter-patter. The moment the lightning rune was successfully constructed, a change naturally occurred. Lightning as thin as a strand of hair spread out from the lightning rune towards the vortex of blood force. Pitter-patter. When it came into contact with the lightning, Yangming's blood force was like a surging blood cloud as it shook violently. Amidst the turbulence, Yangming's blood force's strength slowly increased. Of course, the increase was so slight that it was almost undetectable. A few hours later, Gray ended his cultivation. He could not help but shake his head when he sensed the changes in his blood power. The increase is too slow. If I do not have the help of medicine, I am afraid it will take me 100 years to make my blood power change and increase a level. Gray finally understood why most of the Annihilation elites were stuck at the first level. Practicing the high-class secret skills of the Holy Palace faction could not increase a level even after 100 years. Practicing the normal secret skills was even slower. It was no wonder some people were still stuck at the first level of Annihilation class when they died of old age. I need to use other methods. In Gray's mind, he quickly found the formula for the Thunder Pattern Potion, which was an auxiliary training potion that he needed to temper his thunder attributability. Gold and silver mushroom, thunder cloud grass, thunder flower, double moon flower. After looking at the formula for the thunder potion, Gray was speechless. To make this magic potion, it required 100 different magic herbs. One of them was even more precious than the blood moon grass. Gray estimated that even with the resources of the top 5 families, they would only be able to find a few. That was not the most troublesome part. The most troublesome part was the level of the potion. It is a 5th level potion. Aubrey was only a 4th level potion master. Although he had the potential to become a 5th level potion master, he was not yet a 5th level potion master. He did not have the ability to make the potion. Hansen had grown a lot in the past 3 years. He had become a 3rd level potion master, but the gap between him and Aubrey was even bigger. There was no way he could make the potion. Among the people I know, I am afraid only Master Roman has the ability to make it. Last time, I rejected his offer to be a student. If I ask him for the potion, I am afraid Gray thought of Master Roman, but he rejected the idea. He might not say yes. It would be too awkward to ask him. I will not consider the health potion for now. Aside from the health potion, I am afraid the only way to increase my speed is through the second change. After reaching Annihilation class, Gray felt that the second change had been removed from his body. He was now no different from an ordinary person. If he did not practice, his power would not increase. If he wanted to regain the second change, the method was simple. He had to find the blood of a Rule class blood beast and consume it. Then, he would be able to achieve the second change. Of course, if he wanted to use blood skill training and the second change to complement each other, it would be best if he consumed the blood of Space Rule Blood Beast. Where can I find the blood of a Space Rule Blood Beast? Even if I can find the blood of a Rule class blood beast, it will be fine. But finding Rule class blood is easier said than done. Gray shook his head with a wry smile. The next moment, he froze. Space Rule Blood Beast blood was difficult to find, but Rule class blood beast blood was not impossible. The blood of an unknown level he had obtained last time might have been Rule class blood beast blood. Chapter 728. Previously, because of the Fox of Disaster Puppet's blood, Gray had temporarily given up on consuming the unknown blood beast blood. Since then, he had put the blood aside and had not consumed it until now. Now that he wanted to obtain a Rule class bloodline, he could not help but think of this unknown blood beast blood. What was certain was that this blood beast level was extremely high. It was definitely beyond the ordinary disaster class. It was at least close to a Rule class blood beast blood. It might even be a Rule class blood beast blood. He took out the blood from the space item. Inside the transparent crystal bottle was red blood. The color was scarlet like a ruby. If he did not shake it, it could be mistaken for a ruby. A terrifying pressure spread out. It was extremely strong. Even though it was not the first time he had faced this kind of pressure, When he took out the blood and felt the pressure, Gray could not help but feel his body slightly tense. That was the natural reaction of the body when it felt danger. In other words, the blood beast with this kind of blood had the ability to bring danger to Gray. It should be known that Gray had reached the Annihilation class and had mastered the time rule and space rule. If it could still bring him danger, one could imagine how strong the blood beast with this kind of blood was. After uncorking the bottle, the smell of blood and a faint fragrance entered Gray's nose. Obviously, the blood was still fresh and had not decayed. Even after a long time, it still had not decayed. It was unknown whether it was because the outer layer of the gem had prevented it from decaying or because the level of the blood was extremely high. It had the ability to preserve freshness that time could not destroy. Gulp! After drinking the blood, Gray's body suddenly reacted. His body temperature was soaring. It was as if there was a furnace in his body that was emitting scorching heat, causing his body temperature to soar rapidly. In a short period of time, it exceeded 100 degrees Celsius and continued to increase rapidly. 200 degrees Celsius. 300 degrees Celsius. 1000 degrees Celsius. Under the effect of the furnace in his body temperature quickly exceeded 1000 degrees Celsius. The clothes on his body turned into ashes, and the ground under his feet turned into magma. With such a high temperature, an ordinary person would have been burned to ashes. However, he was obviously not an ordinary person. He was a blood warrior, and an Annihilation class blood warrior at that. He was a powerful existence that could destroy a city with a population of millions with just his physical strength. Therefore, even though his body temperature was over 1000 degrees Celsius, he was still not burned to ashes. However, although he was not burned to ashes, a shocking change appeared on his body. Swish, swish, swish. Rays of dazzling white light shone from his body. As the temperature of his body rose higher and higher, he actually began to emit light. The light was so dazzling that it was hard to open one's eyes. At this moment, he was like a sun that was radiating heat. Even the light of the burning sun in the sky was suppressed by his light at this moment. Poof, poof, poof. The courtyard Gray lived and suffered a devastating blow. Beams of light pierced through the walls and ceiling. In just an instant, the courtyard he lived in was riddled with holes. Even the surrounding buildings were affected. Fortunately, this was an important place of the Leopold family. Fod and the others quickly reacted and used their abilities to hold up a barrier, blocking the light that Gray unconsciously shot out. After a long time, the transformation finally ended. Gray's courtyard had been completely turned into ruins. The ground under his feet had turned into magma. At this moment, he was standing naked in the magma. Walking out of the magma, he activated a blue ring on his finger. Gray put on a blue combat suit. Looking around, Gray helplessly shook his head. The commotion caused by swallowing the blood beast blood this time was too great. Fortunately, Fod and the others blocked the light in time. Otherwise, it would not be just one courtyard that was damaged, but the entire residence of the Leopold family. After taking a bath and changing to another courtyard, Gray had time to check the changes of the blood he swallowed this time. Slightly anticipating, he closed his eyes. As usual, Gray began to feel the power in his body through the blood vessels. After a moment, he opened his eyes, which were filled with astonishment. No increase in power. After causing such a huge commotion, he originally thought that he would obtain a new ability or even a rule ability directly. However, to his surprise, he did not obtain any ability, not even a single elemental ability. No increase in a single elemental ability. It seems that I already possessed the few single elemental abilities that made up the unknown blood beast ability. Soon, Gray thought of the reason. The reason why he did not obtain a new single elemental ability after swallowing the blood of the unknown blood beast was that the single elemental abilities that made up the unknown blood beast ability could be found in his body. Naturally, there was no increase in a single elemental ability. No new hybrid ability or rule ability. It seems that this should be the uniqueness of the abilities recorded in the Book of Spatial Rules. His right index finger and thumb supported his chin. Gray thought of a record in the Book of Spatial Rules. According to the records in the Book of Spatial Rules, abilities were unique. In a person's body, an ability could only exist in a rule ability. For example, the lightning ability existed in a rule ability of space. Gray could not have other rule abilities that were made up of lightning abilities. He could not even form a hybrid ability that had nothing to do with the spatial rules. The hybrid ability or rule ability of the unknown blood beast blood should have overlapped with the time or space rules in his body. Therefore, after being constructed in his body, it automatically disintegrated and did not form a hybrid ability or rule ability. I wonder if the unknown blood beast ability is a hybrid ability or a rule ability? Gray frowned. Due to the uniqueness of the ability, the unknown blood beast ability disintegrated and did not form a hybrid ability or rule ability in his body. Therefore, he could not determine whether the unknown blood beast ability was a hybrid ability or a rule ability. Judging from a reaction of the body's transformation, it might be a light rule ability. Thinking of the transformation process, Gray made a guess. Although he could not control the transformation process, he could still feel his body emitting a white light that resembled the sun. He could not help but think of the saint of the light's law of light, as it was too similar to her law of light. Of course, this was only his guess. Whether it was true or not, he would never be able to verify it. It was a pity that he could not obtain a new rule ability or a hybrid ability. The only thing that comforted Gray was that the second transformation was only related to the level of his bloodline. Even if the blood of an unknown blood beast was not at the rule rank, it was close to the rule rank. It would definitely trigger his second transformation. Now, all he had to do was wait to determine which elemental ability would be triggered by the second transformation. He had secret techniques for all 10 types of abilities, such as time and space rules. After confirming the ability of the transformation, he could cultivate the corresponding secret techniques. Naturally, the speed of improvement would increase. Of course, if possible, Gray still hoped that the transformation ability triggered by the second transformation would be related to the spatial rule ability. After all, the spatial rule ability secret techniques came from the Book of Spatial Rules and were obviously of a higher level than the time rule ability secret techniques. A few days later, under the second transformation state, Gray's blood force underwent an obvious change. The blood force that should have been as red as blood now had a few strands of gold inside it. Although they were very few, they were there. These strands of gold had a sharp aura that gave Gray the feeling of seeing a sharp blade. The first ability of the transformation is not a thunder ability, but a metal ability. According to the records in the Book of Spatial Rules, such a change was a characteristic of the metamorphosis of the metal ability. In other words, the first transformation ability triggered by the second transformation was a metal ability. Gray was quite satisfied with this. Although it was not a thunder ability, but a metal ability, it was also one of the spatial rule abilities. The cultivation method was also a high-level secret technique in the Book of Spatial Rules. The first transformation ability has been confirmed. It's time to move. After finishing his training, Gray felt that the improvement he received every day under the state of the second metamorphosis had increased by leaps and bounds. He decided to return to the plane. After leaving for 5 years, it was time to go back. He did not take anyone with him. He only saw Francis before leaving. Then, Gray set off in the direction of the Light Territory. The Light Territory was the name of the territory controlled by the Light Temple. It was located in the east of the Source World. It was an area that was no smaller than the Chaos Territory. Whoosh! He used teleportation to travel to places where there were no people. He used flying to travel to places where there were people. Very quickly, half a month passed. Gray had already left the Chaos Territory. He had already passed through a few territories. Not every territory had a holy faction. In fact, most of the territories did not have a holy temple faction. Compared to the Chaos Territory, these territories were more like the Chaos Territory. Without a holy temple faction that could set the rules, these territories were even more chaotic than the Chaos Territory. All the clans kept fighting. Along the way, Gray saw more than a dozen battles of different sizes. There were even Annihilation class battles. There were still some forces that treated Gray as an enemy force and attacked him. Naturally, Gray didn't hold back. He taught this force a lesson and plundered the family as compensation. Whoosh! One day, Gray was hurrying through the sky. Suddenly, a terrifying gale that tore through the air came from behind Gray. He turned around to look and immediately saw a super-large runic ship approaching him at high speed. This was a gigantic runic ship that was 400 to 500 meters long. It was the largest runic ship that Gray had ever seen. The scariest thing about it was the speed of the rune ship. It was Annihilation class, so Gray's flying speed was Annihilation class as well. But the speed of the rune ship was faster than Gray's speed. It was much faster than the speed of a normal rune ship's magic light. Chapter 729. A Saint-class faction is traveling. Such a giant rune ship could only be owned by a Saint-class faction. Without a doubt, it was a Saint-class faction that was traveling. Gray looked at the giant rune ship. The giant rune ship had a symbol of a giant sword. The giant sword was very wide. It was stuck in a pile of dead bodies. It was surrounded by a red flame. On the hilt, there was a pair of cold eyes. They were cold and emotionless. That was a symbol that Gray had never seen or heard of before. The books that Gray had read did not have any record of a Saint-class faction. Clearly, it was a Saint-class faction that he did not know about. Gray looked at the deck of the giant rune ship. He saw a few dozen young people standing on the deck of the giant rune ship. There were handsome young men. There were beautiful young women. There were also ordinary young men with sword-like eyebrows. Every single one of them had a unique presence. Some of them were as sharp as swords. Some of them were as powerful as knives. Some of them were as overbearing as axes. Among them, there was a young man with a pair of sword-like eyebrows. He had a very sharp presence. The young man was wearing white clothes. His long black hair reached his shoulders. Most of it was tied up by a hairband. There were 2 strands of hair on each side of his body. He stood alone at the front of the ship. The people around him were a little behind him. They did not stand next to him. Although it might have been an unintentional move, it was enough to see the young man's position among the dozens of people. What a very powerful, sharp presence. Looking at the young man, Gray was shocked. All of them exuded an aura that was as strong as a sharp weapon, but the aura of the young man in the lead was the strongest. His entire person was like a sword whose sharp aura alone was enough to tear an ordinary person to shreds. First level of Annihilation class. He is about the same age as us, but his level is already first level of Annihilation class. When Gray looked at the dozens of people looked at Gray. He was around the same age as them, but the speed he displayed was at the first stage of Annihilation class. If he was not mistaken, his opponent's level should be at the first stage of Annihilation class. The first level of Annihilation class was a level that only 5 of them could reach. That meant that in terms of level, only 5 of them could compete with him. They couldn't help but be surprised. After all, they weren't ordinary people. They were members of the Bin clan, a saint rank organization. Moreover, they were the most outstanding disciples of the Bin clan's younger generation. Even so, only 5 of them could rival him. This couldn't help but cause them to be shocked and astonished. Was their natural talent too weak, or was their opponent's natural talent too strong? First level of Annihilation class? Even the leading black-haired young man could not help but look at Gray. His eyes narrowed slightly, and no one knew what he was thinking. However, there was no doubt that Gray had attracted his attention. If the disciples of the top clans in the Divine Weapon territory knew about this, they would definitely be jealous. For most of them, it was an honor to be remembered by this person in front of them, because he was the strongest of the younger generation. Schwa. The giant rune ship was extremely fast. It was even above the first level of Annihilation class. It quickly passed Gray. In Gray's eyes, it became smaller and smaller. Gray was curious as to why a saint rank organization was traveling, but it had nothing to do with him. After the thought flashed through his mind, he put it to the back of his mind and continued on his way. Whoosh! He flew forward for more than an hour. Suddenly, Gray saw the shadow of a rune ship appear in front of him. It was not the giant rune ship that he had seen earlier. It was a rune ship that was about 100 feet long. Rune ships were vehicles that only the top clans could create. Normally, it was very rare to see one. He was surprised to see 2 of them in a row within an hour. There was some confusion in his heart. Gray passed by the rune ship and continued on his way. Half an hour later, another rune ship appeared in front of him. It was also a rune ship that was about 100 feet long. Gray was even more confused. A faction that could afford a rune ship was at least a top faction. Seeing 3 rune ships in a row made him wonder if something was happening nearby. He passed by the rune ship and kept going. A few hours later, he encountered 2 more rune ships. It was not just rune ships. There were many people as well. They must have come from different factions. Some rode blood beasts, and some traveled on foot. It was obvious that the appearance of so many factions was not normal. In front of him, 5 people appeared in front of Gray. They passed by Gray. Judging by their speed, they were magic light warriors. After hesitating for a moment, Gray's figure flashed and appeared beside the 5 people. He asked, what is going on? Why are there so many factions here? Seeing Gray suddenly approach, the 5 of them were shocked. They were very alert. They almost turned around and ran. Gray's speed was obviously Annihilation class. Against an Annihilation class elite, even if the 5 of them worked together, they would not be able to beat him. Hearing Gray's question and knowing that Gray didn't have any hostility, they let out a long sigh of relief. A middle-aged man among the 5 hurriedly said, I heard that a plane in the Yellowstone wasteland has collapsed and exposed itself. Many forces are rushing over. We also want to try our luck and see if we can get some good stuff. What could be in a plane? Gray raised his eyebrows. He did not understand what the middle-aged man was saying. To the people of the source world, a plane was a barren land. It lacked resources. There was almost nothing of value there. Plus, there were restrictions in the plane. Therefore, there were very few factions that were interested in a plane. Of course, like the Light Temple, they sacrificed an entire plane and turned it into fuel for their weapons. That was a different situation. They were not interested in the plane's resources. They were interested in the plane itself. I heard that the plane was not naturally formed. It was created by a rule-class elite using space rule power. Understanding the reason for Gray's confusion, the middle-aged man quickly explained. A plane created by a rule-class elite using space rule power? Is there really such a thing? Hearing the middle-aged man's explanation, Gray was shocked. There was a record in the Book of Space Rule. It said that a rule-class elite had once created a plane using space rule power. He was skeptical about that. It was not difficult to open up a space as large as a bit wall. As long as he had enough time, he could do it. For example, his current space was already several kilometers long. Given enough time, he would definitely be able to open up a space as large as a bit wall. However, it was impossible to make the space suitable for animals and plants to live in. Although it was already several kilometers long, the space created was still dead silent. It could not allow animals or plants to live in it. This made him suspicious of the records in the Book of Spatial Laws, but he didn't expect that he would actually hear about a plane created by the power of laws. If it is really a plane created by a rule-class elite, it is not surprising that it can attract so many factions. Gray finally understood why it had attracted so many forces. Even Saint-class forces were attracted to it. There was indeed nothing good in a naturally formed plane, but if it was a plane created by a rule-class elite, it would be different. A plane created by a rule-class elite would definitely have something left behind by a rule-class elite, and this thing would definitely be extremely precious. Even a Saint-level faction would be tempted by such a thing, let alone a top faction. Could it just be a collapsed plane that was mistaken for a plane created by a rule-class elite? Soon, Gray thought of another possibility. A naturally formed plane and a space created by space rule power were actually very similar. Could the people who first discovered this collapsed plane have mistaken the natural plane for a plane created by a rule-class elite? No, I'm afraid it's really a plane created by a rule-class elite. Everything had its day of decline, and dimensions were no exception. Even the origin world could not escape this fate. However, the origin world was too huge, and the time it took to decline was too long. Even a rule-class elite could not wait until that day came. A naturally formed plane was attached to the origin world, but only a very small part of it was attached to the origin world. Only through this small part could one enter the origin world from the natural plane. Otherwise, one would enter the void zone. If such a plane collapsed, the biggest possibility was that the plane was separated from the origin world and the plane drifted into the void zone. This was obviously not the case for the discovered plane. A large part of it must have been exposed to the origin world. This characteristic was very similar to the space created by the power of the natural order. When Gray first created the subspace, he left a long spatial crack in the origin world. Therefore, Gray judged that the discovered plane was likely a plane created by a rule class elite with the power of the spatial rule. Gray quickly sorted out his thoughts, and a smile bloomed on his face. He looked at the 5 magic light warriors and said in an unquestionable tone, "Why don't we travel together?" A plane created by a rule class elite might not only have the things left behind by a rule class elite, but the plane itself was also of great research value to Gray. Perhaps he could find a way to create a plane through this plane. Therefore, he decided to postpone his journey and explore this plane. Chapter 730. No problem. The 5 magic light warriors agreed with a smile that was uglier than crying. As for refusing, would they dare to refuse after seeing Gray's tone? Of course, in reality, even if the 5 of them refused, Gray would not do anything to them. Was he the kind of person who relied on his strength to bully the weak? Of course not. He still had a basic moral bottom line. He would not go so far as to destroy the other party just because his request was rejected. Traveling with the 5, 2 days later, Gray arrived at a wasteland that was barren and full of mountain rocks. This was originally a wasteland that few people cared about. Even hunters would not come here because the environment was not suitable for the survival of wild beasts. It was impossible to encounter prey here. However, at this time, this wasteland was extraordinarily lively. Many forces were gathered here. There were several ruined ships, the largest of which was naturally 400 to 500 meters long that Gray had seen before. It had a sword-shaped symbol on it, and it was a gigantic ruined ship. Some of these forces were composed of 3 to 5 people, some of more than 10 people, and some of them were composed of dozens of people. Their strength was uneven. They each occupied a place, each of them exuding a cold aura, and looked like they were unapproachable. The place that was surrounded by many forces was a slightly strange place. A crack about 10 meters long appeared in the void strangely. It was not very stable, appearing and disappearing. Through the crack that appeared and disappeared, one could clearly see that there were many green plants on the other side of the crack. Sometimes one could even see the figure of wild beasts. It is indeed a plane opened with the ability of space. Seeing this crack, Gray's eyes revealed a slightly excited look. Gray could be said to be the most knowledgeable about space among the people present. After all, he had the ability of the rules of space, which extended to the ability to open up space. With just a glance, he could tell that this was indeed a man-made plane and not a naturally formed plane. If it was a naturally formed plane, there would definitely be a broken plane barrier here. However, there was no trace of a plane barrier at this time. The exposed crack was very similar to when he opened up space, so he was sure that this was definitely an unnaturally formed plane. The crack is very unstable. There is no way to pass through it at all. He looked to the side of the crack and saw that there were dozens of bloody corpses. All of the corpses were incomplete, missing a certain part of their bodies. It was as if their bodies had been cut in half by a guillotine. As the spatial crack opened and closed, there was a great slicing force. These people had probably died to this slicing force. So many forces had gathered here, but no one charged into the crack. Clearly, they had been stopped by the slicing force of the crack. I wonder if I can safely pass through using teleportation. Gray couldn't help but wonder if he could use his teleportation ability to safely pass through this rift and enter the other side of the plane. Teleportation was the ability to move between 2 points. Logically speaking, with his teleportation ability, he should be able to enter the other side of the plane without going through a spatial rift. However, this was not absolute. This crack was not an ordinary thing, but a spatial crack. It might hinder teleportation. If he was obstructed by the crack and appeared beside it, he would be in danger. Those 7 people? Looking a little further away from the crack, Gray squinted his eyes. At this time, a little further away from the crack, there were 7 people. There were men and women among the 7. The youngest one looked middle-aged. Every one of them had an aura that made Gray feel dangerous. Seeing the 7 of them, Gray could not help but think of the 6th level Annihilation class elites he saw when they were attacking the Void Beast. If he was not mistaken, the 7 of them were all 6th level Annihilation class elites. He asked the 5 magic light warriors next to him. Gray quickly learned the identities of the 7 people. Of the 7, 4 of them were from the supergiant rune ship that Gray had first encountered. Gray had guessed correctly. The rune ship belonged to a holy class faction. It was different from the Chaos Holy Palace. It was a holy class faction that existed in the form of a family. It was called the Sacred Soldier Race. The people of this family had the surname Bing. They were the overlords of this territory. Of the other 3, 2 of them were from 2 top-class families that were not any weaker than the 3 strongest families in the Chaos territory. The last person was a middle-aged man with a scar on his left eyebrow. Surprisingly, he did not belong to any faction. He was a lone traveler. He's the same as me. He is from a plane. Gray could not help but look at the scarred, middle-aged man. The scarred, middle-aged man came from a naturally formed plane. He used his own power to break through the barrier of the plane and come to the origin world. After coming to the origin world, his power skyrocketed. In just a few hundred years, he had grown to 6th level Annihilation class. His growth was like a hero in a biography. It was full of legends, where the 7 of them were gathered. We have to stabilize the space crack. Otherwise, even we cannot pass through it. A middle-aged woman with a giant red gem on her neck said with a frown. She looked like a noble woman. It is not easy to stabilize the space crack unless one of us has space rule power. An old man with 2 white eyebrows shook his head and said, the 7 of them were 6th level Annihilation class elites. When they reached that level, their powers had evolved 5 times. Naturally, they all had rule power. Among the 7 of them, none of them had space rule power. They cannot interfere with the space crack. What do we do? An old man with a giant sword on his back frowned. His body looked very strong. Do we have to wait until it stabilizes? It looks like it cannot be stabilized in a short amount of time. I have a suggestion. The middle-aged man with a scar on his left eyebrow said. What suggestion? The other 6 looked at the middle-aged man with a scar on his left eyebrow. The middle-aged man with a scar on his left eyebrow looked at the space crack that was appearing and disappearing. Right now, the space crack is disappearing and disappearing. It is because the plane is not collapsing enough. If we all attack the space crack together, we should be able to speed up the plane's collapse and stabilize the space crack. Using attacks to speed up the plane's collapse? Can that be done? Although this was opened by a rule class elite, it is still a plane. The old man with white eyebrows hesitated. No, maybe it can be done. The middle-aged woman who looked like a noble woman smiled. Of course, it cannot be done in a normal plane, but right now this plane is extremely weak. It should not be that difficult to destroy it. Maybe it really is possible. Let's give it a try. An old man who exuded a terrifyingly sharp aura that seemed to be able to pierce through the clouds in the sky spoke. His words had completely settled the matter. He was one of the 4 6th level Annihilation class elites from the Holy Soldier Race. He had the right to speak. The 7 of them had made a decision. The people from the Holy Soldier Race and the other 2 top families would make it happen for them. Very quickly, all the factions present, including Gray and the 5 Magic Light Warriors, were notified. Faced with the decision of the 7 of them, the factions present did not dare disobey. Plus, if they could use this method to stabilize the space crack, they would be happy to see it happen. They had no reason to disagree. Boom! There were a few hundred attacks. Some of them were 6th level Annihilation class attacks. They all hit the space crack that was around 30 feet long. All kinds of powers were like a hodgepodge combined. The wild power was like a raging sea wave hitting the space crack that was sometimes visible. Near the space crack, rocks, dirt, and everything else was blown away. A giant hole appeared on the ground. Catcha! a clear sound suddenly rang out. Immediately, the faintly discernible spatial crack expanded a little and became even wider. Although it was still faintly discernible, the frequency was clearly not as fast as before. It is working. Keep going. Seeing this change, all the factions were excited. They attacked the space crack again. The space crack was shining brightly. Boom, 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 boom. Under the scary boom, the space crack became longer and wider. The frequency of it appearing and disappearing became longer and longer. In the end, it did not disappear for a long time. So. Without saying anything, the 7-6 level Annihilation class elites rushed toward the space crack. They quickly went into the space crack and entered the dimension. They quickly disappeared from the entrance of the dimension. The space crack is stable. Quick, let's go. The other people's reactions were not slow. Although they were not as fast as the 7-6 level Annihilation class elites, they all exploded with their fastest speed. They all rushed toward the space crack. Go away. A bearded man wielded a knife that was dark green. He slashed at a young man who had collided with him. The young man was sent flying. He took the opportunity to jump into the dimension. An old man with small eyes stomped. Dozens of giant shadow tentacles came out from the ground. They hit the people around him and sent him into the dimension. Hundreds of people rushed toward a space crack that was only 30 feet long. It was very crowded. Some people could not avoid crashing into each other. A fight suddenly broke out. Go away. Gray was squeezed together with a man wearing a claw. He saw Gray next to him. The man with the claw reached out his left hand to swat Gray like he was swatting a fly. He did not know Gray, but he knew the 5 magic light warriors who were with Gray. How strong could a person who was with a magic light warrior be? The weakest person who was there was a magic light warrior. He did not hesitate to slap him. Pang! A shadow was sent flying backward. It was not Gray. It was the man with the claw. Just as the claw of the man with the claw was about to hit Gray, the black mist next to Gray became a giant hand. It slapped the man with the claw away. Chapter 731. Boom! The man with the claw fell to the ground. After he hit the ground, his organs were hit. He coughed up a mouthful of blood. At this time, a large amount of flesh and blood on his body had been corroded and disappeared. At a glance, his body was covered with wounds. Although he was not dead, he was definitely severely injured. Shwa! Seeing the man with the claw, the people who were close to Gray were avoiding him like he was a snake. They all moved away from Gray. They looked at Gray with obvious fear. The man with the claw was not weak. Although he came from a family that was at the bottom, he was the core power of that family. He had first-tier Annihilation class power. Even with that kind of power, he had been easily defeated by the young man. One could only imagine the young man's power. So, he did not care about the attitude of the people around him. Gray quickly jumped into the space crack. He went to the other side of the plane. His principle was that he did not bully others, but he would not be bullied by others. If you hit me, I will hit you back. As for the 5 magic light warriors, was that bullying? Of course not. After all, the 5 of them were not injured. How could that be considered bullying? His power is not bad. Among the people rushing into the space crack, there were the holy soldier children that Gray had seen before. When they saw the power that Gray had displayed, they looked as if they had expected it. To be able to reach the first tier of Annihilation class at such a young age, his power was not simple. If he was too weak, it would have surprised them. Which family is he from? Why have we never seen him before? Aside from the holy soldier children, many other top families had elites there. When they saw the power that Gray had displayed, they were all shocked. That kind of power was probably as good as the holy soldier children. They had never seen someone like that before. It was hard to believe. He should not be from the holy soldier leader. A young woman with black hair and red lips looked as if she was thinking. She was not slow. She quickly ran into the space crack. She was a child of a top-class family that had a 6-tier Annihilation class elite. She was one of the few top-class families that was as good as the Sacred Soldier race. When they entered the plane, they saw a forest. It wasn't too dense and sparse. Occasionally, they could see some beasts hiding in fear. High up in the sky, the sun shone with dazzling light. Seeing this sun, Gray couldn't help but be amazed. It was fine if it was a naturally formed plane, but it had its own rules and the ability to evolve. However, this was a space opened up by a rule-level expert with the ability to open up space. It actually had a sun. He could not help but be surprised. He really wanted to know how the other party did it. If he knew, he might be able to find a way to open up a plane. He didn't stay for long. He wasn't in a hurry to study this plane. It was better to see if there was anything good in this plane. Randomly choosing a direction, Gray sprouted a pair of greenish-black wings on his back and flew in that direction. He didn't know where the good stuff was, so he had no choice but to look around aimlessly. After flying for a while, the forest disappeared. What appeared before him was a wide grassland. The grass was very lush. Some of it was even taller than a person. He could see traces of wild beasts and blood beasts. He kept flying forward. After an hour, he had flown a few hundred miles. He still hadn't reached the end of the grassland. It was obvious that the grassland was very wide. Shwa! Flying in the sky, a giant shadow suddenly appeared above Gray's head. It was a giant bird with a wingspan of 30 meters. It was close to 40 meters. The giant bird's feathers were black. When it moved, there was a metallic sound. It was like it was made of metal. The giant bird's two sharp claws were black. They were very big and sharp. They could easily grab a blood beast that was 10 meters long. At this time, a giant claw was coming toward Gray. The giant bird must have flown higher than where Gray was. After discovering Gray, who was its prey, it lowered its altitude and attacked Gray. Shwa! A wind blade appeared at the tip of Gray's finger. At first, it was only the size of a fruit knife. After shooting out, it quickly grew to dozens of meters long and slashed toward the giant bird. Feeling the terror of the giant wind blade, the giant bird became frightened. It retracted its claws and dodged to the side in fear. It opened its mouth and blocked the wind blade with a blue thunderbolt. Puff! Unfortunately, the blue thunderbolt was destroyed by the wind blade. The giant kite's momentum didn't diminish and draped over the giant bird's body. Although it was only a single elemental ability, Gray, who had reached the first level of destruction, used it with terrifying power. Blood splattered everywhere. The giant bird's body was split in half. However, the two halves of the giant bird's body didn't fall to the ground. Instead, Gray waved his hand and stuffed them into the open space. He was going to store them as a physical storage. Magic Light, Level Blood Beast, Thunder Demon Bird. To have a blood beast of this level, it seems that the level of the blood beasts in this dimension is not low. Gray thought to himself, generally speaking, the level of blood beasts in this dimension was relatively low. For example, the strongest blood beast in the dimension Gray had come from was only king level. Although this was due to the influence of the dimension's origin formation, it was also due to the fact that the dimension's resources were scarce, making it difficult to breed high-grade blood beasts. However, this dimension was different from the one he had come from before. It was even different from most of the dimensions that Gray had learned from books. The level of the blood beasts seemed to be relatively high. Not long after entering this dimension, he had already encountered a magic light level blood beast. It was obvious that magic light level blood beasts were not rare in this dimension. He didn't think that his luck was heaven-defying enough to encounter the only magic light level blood beast in this dimension. So it does have something to do with the fact that this dimension was created by a law-level powerhouse. Gray felt that the reason for this situation was probably because this dimension had been created by a law-level powerhouse. A dimension created by a law-level powerhouse was obviously not ordinary. The restrictions of a normal dimension's resources might not apply to this dimension, but under the deliberate control of a law-level powerhouse, it was not impossible that the environment here was even better than the origin worlds. It was not hard to understand why high-grade blood beasts could survive in this kind of environment. After flying for another 100 or so kilometers, a dazzling light attracted Gray's attention. He quickly descended in the direction of that dazzling light. As he got closer, Gray could clearly see what was emitting that dazzling light. It was a plant about 10 centimeters tall. Its roots were golden yellow, and at the very top was a palm-sized flower. The palm-sized flower's outer appearance was like a burning flame. The dazzling golden light was being emitted by this palm-sized flower. Blaze flower. As an alchemist, Gray recognized this plant at a glance. The blaze flower was a magic herb with a flower that looked like a raging flame. Its medicinal value was comparable to the blood moon grass. It could be used as the main ingredient of a level 4 magic potion. This kind of magic herb usually took about 100 years to mature, and the sign of maturity was the release of golden light. This was a mature blaze flower, but it was still a few days away from fully maturing and its medicinal effect reaching its peak. At most, it would be a year or a few months. Gray naturally could not wait that long, so he could only pick it now. But before that bang, Gray stomped on the ground with his right foot, and a large amount of soil rolled like an earth dragon. Then, a rock python with an earthy yellow surface was rolled out, completely exposed to the outside world. Among the earth-type abilities he had obtained, there was a derivative ability to detect underground. Just now, he had used this derivative ability to discover this rock python. Hiss! The rock python was about 30 meters long, and its body was covered in a layer of rock. After being exposed, its 2 huge vertical eyes stared at Gray. It opened its mouth, revealing sharp poisonous fangs, and bit at Gray. Caca! Gray gently stomped his foot again. Then, a scary cold air spread. It spread toward the rock python. The rock python jumped toward Gray, and its body was quickly covered in ice. In a moment, the rock python became an ice sculpture. Being frozen by the ice, the rock python kept struggling. With Gray's Annihilation class power, the ice power was not something it could escape, so it could only struggle in vain. Gray walked past the rock python. He carefully picked the blaze flower and took out a wooden box that could preserve the medicinal effect. He put it inside. Then, he flew up and left. After he left, the ice broke, and the rock python was free again. The reason it was not frozen to death was because Gray had purposely taken something from the rock python. Gray spared the life of the rock python. A few days later, Gray appeared in a forest. No one had visited that place for a long time. There were many rare herbs. Gray had a lot to gain. He had found some of the magic herbs that the gold pattern potion needed. The gold pattern potion was a potion that Gray needed to practice the gold element skills. It was the same as the gold pattern potion. It was a level 5 potion. Gray had ordered the 5 families to search for it, but he did not know how much they would be able to find. He didn't expect to gain so much in this plane. It was a pleasant surprise. Boom, 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 boom. It sounded like a drum. It sounded like it was coming from a few miles away. Is there another fight? Hearing that noise, Gray was not surprised. There were many good things in that place. Seeing something good, it was inevitable that there would be a fight. Gray hurried over. He wanted to see what good things the 2 sides had found. If it was someone else's item, he would not have taken it. But in that place, the items did not belong to anyone. If they could fight for it, he could fight for it too. Quickly, he saw the 2 sides fighting. One side had 8 young people wearing good battle armor. They were the children of some top-class family. The other side had 5 people. Seeing the 5 people, Gray's lips curled up. Those 5 people were the ones who had led him here. Chapter 732. Blurg. The 5 people that Gray was leading were at a disadvantage. Facing the attacks of the 8 people, the 5 of them had new wounds on their bodies. They were bleeding. If you don't want to die, hand over the blood moon grass. Among the 8 young people that were attacking the 5, one of them was quite handsome. He had a hooked nose, which ruined his image. He coldly looked at the 5 of them. We found this blood moon grass first. The 5 of them looked angry. After entering the dimension, they had not been very lucky. After a few days, they had only found some low-level magic medicine. Finally, they were lucky enough to find a rare magic medicine, the blood moon grass. They thought they were lucky, but they did not expect to be targeted by the 8 of them. It looks like you want to die. The hook-nosed young man's face looked cold. He slashed. The knife had a very scary gravity. It was like a mountain coming toward one of the 5 people. Blurg. Feeling the scary danger, The magic light warrior's blood beast power madly poured into the knife in his hand. A yellow light spread. It became a giant knife that was a few feet long. It was like a shield in front of him. Under the attack of the hook-nosed young man that was like a mountain, the giant knife was broken. He was hit. A few of his ribs were broken. He spat out blood and flew away. After hitting the ground, he spat out more blood. He tried to stand up, but he fell to the ground again. He was obviously badly injured. Vic, seeing their comrade badly injured, the other 4 magic light warriors were anxious and angry. They looked at the hook-nosed young man with fire. One of the magic light warriors could not help but think of Gray. Our comrade is an annihilation class elite. Are you not afraid of our comrade? Your comrade? The hook-nosed young man's face changed. He knew who the comrade the 5 of them were talking about. He also knew how powerful he was. Han Sun was fighting an annihilation class elite near the space crack. He had seen it happen. He was terrified. He was about the same age as them, but his power was terrifyingly strong. Even if the 8 of them worked together, they would not have been able to defeat an annihilation class elite. Yet, he had been severely injured by one hit. That kind of power shocked them. However, he quickly regained his composure and sneered. Don't try to use him to scare us. Not to mention that it's impossible for you to be his companions. Even if you are, do you think our Sebel clan is afraid of him? That's right. No matter how strong they are, can they be stronger than our Sebel clan? Does he really think that the Sebel clan is afraid of him? A young man echoed. Haha, if that guy were here and heard that we are from the Sebel family, he might offer us the magic herbs. Another young man added, his face full of arrogance and disdain. Really? Along with the voice, Gray's figure suddenly appeared beside the young man like a hurricane. The hurricane that blew up almost blew the young man away. He looked at the young man with interest, the corners of his mouth revealing a playful smile. I don't have blood moon grass, but I do have a few mana herbs that are as valuable as blood moon grass. Do you want them? Why are you here? Looking at Gray, who was so close to him, the young man's face looked frightened. He was sweating profusely as he retreated. He was just trying to make fun of Gray while he was not there. If he really wanted to force Gray to hand over the magic herbs, he would not have dared to do so. Even if his family was one of the top families in the God Weapon territory, he would not have dared to do so. If it had been an ordinary annihilation class elite, the Sebel clan would have had the power to force them to hand over what they had. But was he an ordinary annihilation class elite? An annihilation class elite could not even block one hit from him. The kind of power was not as simple as an ordinary annihilation class elite. His battle power was at least a second-tier annihilation class elite. With that kind of battle power, his family was not confident they could kill him. With his power, if he escaped and hid in the dark to attack his family, it would have been a disaster for his family. Didn't you ask me to give you the mana herbs? The corners of Gray's mouth curled up into a smile as he looked at the young man, causing the latter to involuntarily take a few more steps back. It wasn't until the other 7 saw Gray appear that their hearts were greatly alarmed and converged with him that he finally felt a bit of security. Oh no, these 5 people are related to him. The 8 people who had been so arrogant earlier huddled together as if they were facing a big enemy. They did not care about the 5 magic light warriors anymore. Many of them stared at the young man who had just spoken. They wanted to slap him in the face. Would you die if you did not talk big? Now, the young man had heard it. Mister, this is a misunderstanding. We do not want to take your mana herbs. The young man with the hooked nose looked at Gray with a serious expression. But you guys seem to want the mana herbs that my friends have. Gray narrowed his eyes as he looked at the 8 people with the hooked nose. Although he was smiling, the young man with the hooked nose felt a chill in his heart. It was as if a sharp blade was pressed against their necks. A misunderstanding, an absolute misunderstanding. We did not know that they were your friends. The hooked nose young man hurriedly said. In other words, because of a misunderstanding, you injure my friends? Gray still had a smile on his face as he looked at the 8 people. Compensation. We are willing to give you a frost moon flower as compensation. Cold sweat slid down the hooked nose young man's forehead as he hurriedly took out a white wooden box from his spatial item. Whoosh! A shadow tentacle appeared under Gray's feet, rolled up the wooden box from the hooked-nosed young man's hand and handed it to Gray. When he opened the wooden box, he saw a white flower that was as cold as ice. It was indeed the frost moon flower that he had seen before. "Okay, seeing that you guys are sincere, I'll write off this debt." Gray nodded. The hooked-nosed young man and the others felt relieved. They quickly turned around and left. Their hearts ached. The frost moon flower had been difficult for them to get. Now, they had not gotten the blood moon grass, and they had lost the frost moon flower. They did not want to seek revenge from their families. Even if they reported this to the annihilation elites of their families, the annihilation elites of their families would not do anything for them. He had provoked an annihilation class elite, and it was a very powerful annihilation class elite. Paying the price of a frost moon flower was not too much. There was no need to anger a powerful annihilation class elite for something like that. "Yo, we meet again." Gray closed the wooden box with the frost moon flower. He very naturally put the wooden box with the frost moon flower into his spatial item. Although, at his current level, using the frost moon flower as the main ingredient to concoct auxiliary potions was almost useless, he still needed the frost moon flower in the concoction of the golden vein potion. "Mr. Gray, thank you so much for saving us." Seeing Gray put the frost moon flower into his spatial item in front of the five of them twitched their lips. They did not say anything, even though the frost moon flower was supposed to be their compensation. The 8 of them didn't know about their relationship with Gray, but how could they not know? It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they had no relationship with him at all. They were already very grateful that Gray had stood up for the 5 of them. As for the moonfrost flower, they naturally wouldn't expect it. "Mr. Gray, this is the blood moon grass that the 8 of them from the D-Sebel family want." The 5 of them looked at each other and hesitated for a moment. Then, one of them took out a long and narrow wooden box from his space item and handed it to Gray. "Thank you, Mr. Gray, for saving us. We're willing to give you this blood moon grass as thanks." Gray did not take it. He just shook his head. "No need. You guys can keep it." Under normal circumstances, he would not mind snatching it when he saw 2 parties fighting over it. However, since the 5 of them were the ones who got it, he would not snatch it from them. After all, they had led the way for him and allowed him to enter this realm. They had also benefited a lot. How could he snatch it from them? He didn't walk with the 5 of them. After confirming that the 8 of them had indeed left, Gray also left. In the end, he was only grateful for them for showing him the way. Being able to lend a hand to save them was already extremely benevolent. As for bringing the 5 of them to protect their safety, that was impossible no matter what. Thump, thump, thump. In the dense forest, large patches of trees collapsed. Birds and beasts fled in fear. The ground trembled slightly. A giant tortoise with an exaggerated body length of more than 40 meters was crawling. The giant tortoise's shell was green and had large black patterns on it, forming a huge natural pattern. The giant tortoise emitted a strong pressure. Even from a few miles away, one could feel the intense pressure from the giant tortoise. Disaster-grade blood beast green rock disaster tortoise. This realm really does have high-level blood beasts. On top of a giant tree that was a few hundred meters tall, Gray coldly looked at the green rock disaster tortoise from afar. His guess had been confirmed. The blood beasts in this realm were very high level. Before, there were only magic light class blood beasts. Now, he had even encountered a disaster-grade blood beast. It proved that his guess was correct. Of course, a disaster-grade blood beast like this could not do anything to him. If he wanted to, he could kill the green rock disaster tortoise in a short amount of time. This level of danger was not enough to threaten him. In fact, the people who had entered this realm were the biggest threats. 7 destruction grade 6 elites. Even with his current power, he had no chance of winning. After all, they were people who had mastered rule powers, and they were 5 levels higher than him. He continued to search aimlessly. In front of him, the forest suddenly disappeared, and the temperature suddenly increased. A barren land appeared before Gray's eyes. This was a very wide barren land. He could not see the end of it. The soil and stones were a strange red color. They had an unusually high temperature. He could feel the heat from afar. What a high temperature! He reached out to touch the soil under his feet. He felt that the temperature had reached 70 to 80 degrees. Gray looked surprised. Such a high temperature was obviously not caused by the sun. With the strength of the sun in this realm, it was impossible for it to cause such high temperatures. Obviously, the reason why the temperature in this area was so high had to be related to the area itself. Perhaps there was something underground that was constantly emitting heat, causing the soil and stones in this area to be hot. Since I found it, I might as well check it out. Without hesitation, Gray stepped into the barren land. Normal people would not be able to move in such an environment with a temperature of 70 to 80 degrees. Of course, this temperature was not a problem for Gray. Threads of cold air covered his body. The heat was blocked out. His body felt cool. Gray easily walked deeper into the barren land. In fact, with his body's strength and heat resistance, even if he did not do anything, it would not affect him. His clothes, however, were going to suffer. Because of that, he used his ice powers. It looks like the source of this area's abnormal temperature is in the deepest part. As he walked forward, the temperature got higher. After walking 500 feet, Gray noticed that the temperature outside had reached 100 degrees. The deeper he went, the higher the temperature got. Clearly, the culprit of this area's abnormal temperature was in the deepest part of this area. So, after confirming the source of the abnormality, Gray stopped walking slowly. His body was wrapped in cold air. He quickly went deeper into the barren land. Generally speaking, as long as there was an abnormal place, there was bound to be something abnormal. For example, the lake where the frost moonflower was located would be frozen by the cold air emitted by the frost moonflower. Of course, compared to the abnormality here, the abnormality caused by the frost moon hair was simply insignificant. There was no comparison at all. He wanted to see what exactly caused the abnormality in the temperature of this place. He might be able to reap a huge harvest. Suddenly, Gray, who was running forward, stopped abruptly. His eyes were filled with disbelief. That's impossible. How could a plane like this have? Gray's face was solemn. His body was tense, and his hair stood on end. At this moment, there was a pressure shrouding his body. This was an extremely powerful pressure. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on him. It made him feel as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. He had experienced this kind of pressure before. It was from the unknown blood beast's blood. The strength of the pressure he felt now was no less than the pressure emitted by the unknown blood. According to his speculation, the unknown blood was very likely to be the blood of a law-level blood beast. Even if it wasn't, it was very close. Didn't it mean that the strength of the owner of this pressure was either at the law level or close to it? No matter which one it was extremely shocking. He couldn't contend with them. He had thought highly of this plane, but he didn't expect it to have an existence of this level. No, there's nothing else other than the pressure. Could this pressure be? Forcibly suppressing the idea of using teleportation to escape, Gray wanted to see what kind of creature could have such a strong pressure. However, after waiting for a few moments, there was no movement other than the pressure. He narrowed his eyes and walked forward against the pressure. As he walked forward, the pressure that enveloped him grew stronger and stronger. At the beginning, there was only one mountain pressing down on him. Now, there were 2 or 3 mountains pressing down on him. Even so, there was still no movement. Gray was even more certain of his guess. He strode forward. Finally, he arrived at a place several miles away from the place where he first felt the pressure. After dodging a huge rock, Gray's face suddenly changed. He stared in front of him without blinking his eyes. In front of him, more than a mile away, there was a huge black flame burning. No, it wasn't a black flame. It was the skeleton of a giant beast that was more than 100 meters long. It burned with an inextinguishable black fire. Chapter 733. Black Flames. Gray stared at the gigantic black flame in front of him in shock. He had encountered many people and blood fiends with fire abilities. He had also seen flames of various colors, including red, purple, blue, and gold. However, he had never seen black flames. What shocked him even more was that this black flame was burning on the skeleton of a giant beast. Judging from the environment formed by the long-term exposure to high temperatures, It had been burning for tens of thousands of years. Black flames that had been burning for tens of thousands of years, and the skeleton of a giant beast that had not been damaged after being burned for tens of thousands of years. Both of them were extremely shocking. Silver Bones, this giant beast, is probably, generally speaking, even a disaster-grade blood fiend would only be 40 to 50 meters long. However, this giant beast was more than 100 meters long. It lay there like a continuous mountain range. If it was just its size, it would not prove anything. It was not that there were no large but weak blood fiends. However, the Silver Bones undoubtedly revealed the identity of this giant beast. According to a book he had read, Silver Bones were a characteristic of the rule level. Since the bones of this giant beast were silver, it must have been a rule-level blood fiend. A rule-level blood fiend actually died here. It must have been killed by the rule-level powerhouse who created this plane. Although the species in this plane were extremely high-level and there were even disaster-grade blood fiends, Gray did not think that this plane had the ability to produce a rule-level blood fiend. He was more willing to believe that this rule-level blood fiend had been killed and thrown into this plane by the rule-level powerhouse who had created this plane. Even after death, it can still affect an extremely wide area and cause a fundamental change in the climate of this area. Is this a rule-level blood fiend? Gray was deeply shocked. The description of the rule level in the book was extremely vague. It was about controlling and breaking the rules. However, Gray had never understood what it meant to control and break the rules. Now that he saw the black flames burning on the giant beast body that would never be extinguished and the vast area that had been completely turned into a barren land, Gray finally understood what it meant to control and break the rules. Flames needed a burning medium. Even if it was a flame released by a blood warrior who possessed the ability of fire, it still needed the strength of blood as a burning medium. Once the supply of strength of blood was stopped, the flame would be extinguished immediately. However, this black flame had not been extinguished even after tens of thousands of years. Furthermore, there was no medium for it to burn. It clearly defied common sense and broke the general rules. Burning for tens of thousands of years without any combustion medium, turning the impossible into the possible and changing the natural environment of a large area. If this wasn't controlling and breaking the rules, what was it? Rule level. For some reason, Gray's heart was fascinated. Right now, his level was Annihilation class. He controlled 2 rules. Compared to rule class elites, controlling rules and breaking rules, he could not compare to them. An elite like that could kill him with 1 finger. In front of the other party, he was probably just a slightly stronger grasshopper. If the other party wanted to pinch him to death, it could be done easily. Since the giant bee skeleton that is emitting this pressure is rule level, then the blood beast blood I swallowed before is probably rule level blood beast blood too. At this point, Gray was basically certain that the unknown blood beast blood he had swallowed was rule level blood beast blood. The only thing he was not sure about was what kind of rule-level blood beast blood this blood beast blood was. Moving his gaze away from the rule-level blood beast skeleton, Gray looked around the rule-level blood beast skeleton. Suddenly, his eyes shone with joy. That is, in the Red Land, the soil and rocks were accompanied by a high temperature. The terrifying high temperature made it so that not a single blade of grass grew there. After entering the Red Land, Gray had not seen any plants. Logically speaking, no plants should be able to survive in such an environment. However, at that moment, Gray saw a plant next to the giant beast skeleton. It was a plant that was completely red. It was almost the same as the surrounding soil and rocks. It was a few miles away. Before paying close attention, Gray had not seen this plant. It was a crimson-red plant with thick rhizomes. It was more than a meter tall and looked like a short shrub. Its surface had a jade-like luster and was slightly translucent, as if it was carved out of huge red jade. At the top of the red plant was a red fruit the size of a baby's fist. There were many water caltrops on the surface, like a huge polyhedral gem. Seeing this plant, Gray's heart could only be described as shocked. This was because the value of this plant was too extraordinary. It's actually a scarlet flame fruit. Gray's voice was tinged with excitement. The scarlet flame fruit was a rare magic herb that could only be produced in extremely hot environments. It was one of the top magic herbs, and even saint-level forces would covet and fight over it. The reason it was so precious was that the effects of this magic herb were too terrifying. To give a simple example, if what Gray was undergoing right now wasn't a metamorphosis of the metal element, but a metamorphosis of the fire element, then he would only need a single scarlet flame fruit. He wouldn't even need to refine it into a magic potion and directly consume it to complete the metamorphosis of the fire element and raise his realm by 1 level. For an annihilation class, every increase in level would take hundreds of years. If he did not undergo the second metamorphosis, even if Gray practiced the top secret techniques in the Book of Space Rules, it would take him hundreds of years to complete one metamorphosis. But this fruit was enough to save him hundreds of years. One could only imagine how powerful the effects of this fruit were. Of course, directly swallowing it was not the best way to use this fruit. The best way to use it was to use other magic herbs to make a magic potion. The magic potion made with this fruit as the main ingredient would be as high as level 6. It was a magic potion that was useful even to rule class elites. From this, it was not difficult to see how precious this fruit was. Whoosh! Under the pressure, Gray felt as if he was carrying several mountains on his back, but he still rushed toward the scarlet flame fruit at an extremely fast speed. After all, it was the skeleton of a dead Rule class blood beast. It was far from comparable to a living Rule class blood beast. With Gray's current strength, even if he was carrying several mountains on his back, he could still move as fast as flying. In almost the blink of an eye, Gray had already arrived beside the scarlet flame fruit. He carefully picked the scarlet flame fruit and put it into the wooden box. He then put the wooden box into his space item. There were no blood beasts blocking him. Earlier, he had already used his earth element ability to check the ground. There were no blood beasts hiding underground. Logically speaking, such a precious magic herb should be guarded by a powerful blood beast. However, the skeleton of a Rule class blood beast, which was constantly emitting pressure, stopped the blood beast from approaching. This gave Gray the chance to pick the scarlet flame fruit. Otherwise, this scarlet flame fruit would have been in the stomach of some other blood beast. After doing all this, Gray heaved a sigh of relief. He glanced at the black flames that continued to burn with terrifying power and left the Crimson Land without hesitation. If there were no black flames, he would not have minded taking away this Rule Class B skeleton. With this Rule Class B skeleton, it was completely enough to refine legacy weapons, and there would be more than one. However, with this black flame that clearly had terrifying power surrounding it, it was obviously impossible to take away this Rule Class Blood B skeleton to refine a legacy weapon. Thus, he left without hesitation. Finally found it. Not long after Gray left, 5 young people appeared at the edge of the Crimson Land. One of the young people held a huge map in his hand. A part of the terrain on the map was faintly similar to this forest. There was a place marked with a red cross, and this place was the Crimson Land. Chapter 734. Tens of thousands of years have passed, and many of the landforms have changed, causing us to get lost several times. Fortunately, we've finally found it. A young man sighed in relief as he put away the map. Is there really a scarlet fire fruit here? Another young man asked doubtfully. It can't be wrong. The 5th generation saint was invited by the saint who created this plane and entered as a guest. At the time, he discovered that this was a place used to nurture scarlet fire fruits. The young man nodded. The other clans, even the 2 most powerful clans, did not know who had created this plane. However, the Sacred Weapon clan, which had a long history, had deduced the previous owner of this plane from their clan's library. They even knew where the most important places in this plane were likely to contain precious items. The 5 of them had been arranged to harvest the scarlet fire fruits, while the other experts of the Sacred Weapon clan had been arranged to go to places with even more precious treasures. This was a foundation that non-saint level factions could not possess. With an extremely long history, the Sacred Weapon clan had grasped many secrets. And these secrets were enough to allow the Sacred Weapon clan to seize the initiative at special times, such as when the plane was collapsing, to reap benefits that far exceeded those of other factions. Let's go and see if there are any scarlet fire fruits here. A young man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes took the lead as he stepped into the scarlet ground. The other four hurriedly followed, clearly taking the lead. The young man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes had a head of long black hair. His entire body exuded an extremely powerful and sharp aura. This was the young man Gray had seen before. Louis Bing was the most outstanding direct descendant of the Sacred Weapon clan's younger generation. He had already been recognized as the next successor of the Sacred Weapon clan. His status in the Sacred Weapon clan was similar to that of the Saint's son and Saintess of a Saint-level faction. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The five of them were all extremely powerful. Soon, the five of them endured the pressure and saw the skeleton of a behemoth shrouded in black flames. It's just as recorded in the books. There really is a behemoth skeleton here that has grasped the law of flame. This is indeed a place suitable for nurturing scarlet fire fruits. Seeing the giant bee skeleton wrapped in black flames, the five of them couldn't help but feel excited. Even Louis Bing had a look of joy on his face. The scarlet flame fruit was a precious magic herb that could be used to concoct grade 6 magic potions. It was extremely precious even within the Sacred Weapon race. If he could obtain it and concoct the corresponding magic potions, he would be able to increase his cultivation by a level within a short period of time. Over there, scanning the surroundings of the giant bee skeleton, the five of them quickly discovered the scarlet crystal fruit tree that was over a meter tall. In a flash, the five of them arrived beside the scarlet fire fruit tree. However, the five of them soon revealed disappointed expressions. They had indeed discovered a scarlet flame fruit tree. However, there was no scarlet flame fruit. How could that be? There isn't one? The five of them were greatly disappointed. However, they did not expect to see the scarlet flame fruit tree, but not the scarlet flame fruit. Looks like we came at the wrong time. The scarlet fire fruits should have already withered. A young man's face was filled with disappointment. A precious magic herb like the scarlet flame fruit would hang on the fruit tree for hundreds of years even after it matured. However, no matter how long it took, it would eventually wither. Unfortunately, they had come at the wrong time. The scarlet flame fruit had already withered, but a new scarlet flame fruit had yet to grow. That's not right. The scarlet flame fruit didn't wither. It was plucked by someone. Louis Bing's sword-like eyebrows rose as he stared at a fresh scar on the top of the scarlet flame fruit. There was clearly something there, but it had been plucked by someone. That thing was very likely the scarlet flame fruit. The reason he thought it was a human was because no blood beast dared to approach under the pressure of a rule-class blood fiend. Only those who had entered this plane would dare to approach. It really was plucked by someone. When the other four heard his words, they also took a closer look. Their expressions immediately turned furious. They had finally arrived here after so much effort, but they didn't expect someone to beat them to it. It was as if someone had stolen something from them. This made them extremely angry. You shouldn't have gone far. The five of us will split up and search, Louis Bing ordered. The other four naturally had no objections. In an instant, the five of them transformed into 5 streaks of light and shot off in 5 different directions, quickly searching the places they had passed by. A giant bird quickly descended from the sky and attacked a young man. However, before it could get close, the young man used dozens of metal blades to cut it into pieces. Blood splattered all over the sky. Damn it! I don't care who you are. How dare you steal my opportunity? I won't forgive you. Gunny Bing's eyes were filled with hostility. He avoided the blood and continued to search the ground and sky. If they could obtain that scarlet flame fruit and refine it into a magic potion, the five of them would have at least advanced a level. However, this scarlet flame fruit had been taken by someone else first. One could imagine his anger. There's someone in front. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. A figure with greenish-black wings on his back had appeared in front of him. Whoosh! His speed reached the limit, and a terrifying whistle sounded in the air. In a few moments, he had already caught up to the person in front of him and blocked his path. It's you, Seeing the person in front of him, he looked shocked. He recognized the person in front of him. He had even paid attention to him. After all, at this person's age, it was rare for him to have a level that was comparable to his own. Someone from the Holy Soldier race. The person who had been blocked was Gray. He squinted his eyes and recognized the person. With super memory, as long as he met someone once, it would be difficult for him to not recognize them. So, he easily recognized the person's identity as a member of the Holy Soldier race. Hand it over. Although he recognized Gray and knew Gray was not someone to be messed with, Gunny Bing did not think he would lose to Gray. So, he looked unfriendly. Although you're a member of the Holy Soldier race, if you want to steal it from me, you have picked the wrong person. Gray's face looked cold. He had encountered someone who dared to steal from him. Although the person was a member of the Holy Soldier race, he was not afraid of them. The only people he was afraid of were the 4 6th-tier annihilation elites of the Holy Soldier race. I don't want anything else, but you must hand over the Scarlet Fire Fruit. That is something that the Holy Soldier race has sworn to get. Anyone who has it must hand it over. Guani Bing said with a sullen face. Scarlet Fire Fruit? What is that? I have never seen it before. Hearing the man mention the Scarlet Fire Fruit, Gray immediately guessed why the man had targeted him. He must have found the Scarlet Fire Fruit tree. Through the marks on the tree, he knew someone had taken the Scarlet Fire Fruit. Gray had thought about destroying the Scarlet Fire Fruit tree or moving it, but it was a tree that could produce Scarlet Fire Fruit. It would be a shame to destroy it. If he moved it, it might not survive. That was why he had not moved it. Now, it had become a loophole. Whether or not you have it, hand over your space item. We will know when we see it. Gunny Bing stared at Gray. He was looking for Gray's space item. Hand over my space item for you to inspect? Huh, you are not qualified to do that. Gray's face looked even colder. His eyes looked cold, not to mention the fact that he hadn't placed the Scarlet Flame fruits in his own space. Even if he had, he wouldn't have let the other party inspect his spatial items. It was simply impossible for him to expose all of his assets to the other party. Then I will have to capture you and search you. Gunny Bing's cold eyes became solid. His right hand became a giant knife. The giant knife was glowing with a gold light. It became a fierce knife light. He slashed toward Gray. Walala. Gray's expression was very cold as he looked at the huge golden blade light that was slashing towards him. He did not move even half a step, but a dark green fog surged out in front of him like a wave. Chi! The golden knife light cut into the dark green mist, but it was like a stone sinking into the sea. It only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. The dark green mist surged toward Gunny Bing. What? His attack was easily nullified by Gray's attack, and more attacks were coming his way. Guani Soldier's face paled, and he quickly dodged. But before he could do so, a wave of dark green mist slammed into him. Crack! Several of his bones broke. He spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward, crashing into a mountain peak. How can you be so strong? Gunny Bing spat out another mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Although he was not the strongest member of the Sacred Soldier race's younger generation, he was still one of the top 5. Yet, he could not even take a single blow from his opponent. He felt like he was facing Louis Bing. But how could that be? Louis Bing was the strongest member of the Sacred Soldier race's younger generation. He had grasped the power of laws. This is a warning. If you continue to pester me, I don't mind killing you. Gray coldly glanced at Gunny Bing. If possible, he did not want to become enemies with the Sacred Soldier race. That was why he displayed his absolute strength to defeat Gunny Bing in one blow. He wanted to make Gunny Bing realize the difference between them and retreat. Cough, cough. I admit that you are very strong, but the Scarlet Fire Fruit is not something you can get your hands on. I can't deal with you, but someone else can. The broken bones caused extreme pain in his body. Louis Bing struggled to stand up and looked into the distance. Gray returned and looked in the direction of his gaze. In the distance, he saw a white stream of light shooting towards them. Its speed was extremely fast, even faster than when he didn't use the power of the laws of time. It was obvious that it had been attracted by the commotion caused by the fight just now. Very soon, the other party appeared before him. Gray's face became slightly stern. It was a young man with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His long black hair was tied behind his back. He was the leader of the younger generation of the Sacred Weapon clan.